Chapter 1254. Self-release. Yi Xian was silent. If he could reach self-release at that time, the situation would be completely different. Because at that time, he would be able to continue using the World Prison Pagoda. Right now, the World Prison Pagoda was still his greatest trump card. It could be said that once he reached self-release, he would undergo a qualitative change. The ancient temple's abbot brought Yi Xian to a hall in the martial arts hall. Inside the hall, there was a Buddha statue. The abbot respectfully bowed to the Buddha statue and then turned to look at Jiju. The latter slightly nodded, clasped his hands together and retreated. The ancient temple's abbot looked at Yi Xian. "Young Master Yi, whether or not you can succeed will depend on your own luck." After saying that, he also retreated. After the abbot retreated, Yi Xian discovered that the space in front of him suddenly became illusory. Outside the hall, Jiju solemnly said, "Abbot, are you really going to help young Master Yi reach self-release?" The abbot nodded. Jiju wanted to say something but hesitated. The abbot softly said, "You want to say that once he reaches self-release, he will be a great threat to us, right?" Jiju nodded. "He is a heavenly genius. Right now, he can already fight against an upper self-release powerhouse. If he reaches self-release, I'm afraid an ordinary upper self-release powerhouse will not be his opponent." The abbot said, "I know." Jiju said, "Abbot, do you have other plans?" The abbot turned to look at the hall and softly said, "If he is really willing to share the Tao scripture with us, then all problems will not exist." Jiju asked, "What if he is not willing?" The abbot clasped his hands together. "We can only gamble on his character." Inside the hall, the current Yi Xian was already in a starry sky. Around him, there were 6 illusory monks. The 6 monks were looking at him. Yi Xian clasped his hands together and slightly bowed. "Greetings, seniors." At this time, a monk in front of him suddenly said, "You are not from my ancient temple." Yi Xian looked at the monk. "In your eyes, master, is there a distinction between inside and outside the temple?" The monk looked at Yi Xian. After a moment he smiled. "Interesting. Are you going to discuss Buddhism with me?" Yi Xian asked, "Master, in your heart, your dharma is higher than mine, so I'm not qualified to discuss with you?" The monk clasped his hands together. "Little brother, are you here to fight?" Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, the monk said again, "However, what you said makes sense. There's an ancient saying that when 3 people walk together, there must be a teacher. There's something we can learn from everyone." Yi Xian clasped his hands together. "Grandmaster, please forgive me if I offended you just now." The monk said with a smile, "It's fine. Since you can appear here, it means that we are fated." Yi Xian said, "To tell you the truth, I am a disciple of the ancient temple. This time, I came to seek guidance from everyone on how to reach self-release 1. Self-release 1. In the field, the monks looked at each other. In the end, the monk in front of Yi Xian said, "Do you want to reach true self-release 1 or false self-release 1? Yi Xian said solemnly, "There's a distinction between true and false self?" The monk nodded. "True self-release 1 transcends the great Tao and is not within the Tao. False self-release 1 is still within the Tao. However, 1 is familiar with the Tao and is on the same level as the Tao." Yi Xian asked, "Is there a difference between the 2? The monk nodded slightly. "A world of difference." Yi Xian said, "I want true self-release 1. The monk looked at Yi Xian. "We can't do it." Yi Xian's face darkened. He felt like he was being toyed with. The monk said with a smile, "True self-release 1, truly surpassing the great Tao, this isn't an ordinary level of difficulty. To tell you the truth, none of you here have reached true self-release 1 on the great Tao." Yi Xian frowned. The monk said, "Because we can't escape the circle of the great Tao." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Is it very difficult?" The monk smiled bitterly. "What you're saying, is it very simple in your opinion?" Yi Xian smiled embarrassedly. "Senior, then I can only become false self-release 1? The monk nodded. "You can't say that. Even though there's a world of difference between false self-release 1 and true self-release 1, False self-release 1 can allow you to better understand true self-release 1. This is a process. After you experience this process, it'll be much easier for you to attain true self-release 1 in the future. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Then I'll false self-release 1 for now." The monk nodded and was about to speak. Right at this moment, a monk in a kasaya on Yi Xian's right suddenly said, "Wait." Everyone in the surroundings gazed at the monk when they heard this. The monk gazed at Yi Xian. "The karma and fate you carry. Can you walk a little closer?" Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he walked over to the monk. The monk in the kasaya lightly tapped the space between Yi Xian's eyebrows. A moment later, some red threads appeared around Yi Xian, but they disappeared in the blink of an eye. At this moment, the monk in the kasaya retreated. The monk gazed at Yi Xian with disbelief in his eyes. "The cause of misfortune." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "The cause of misfortune? What's that?" The monk stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "You carry the cause of misfortune. It's an extremely vicious karmic technique, and someone placed it on you." Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. "Will it bring misfortune to me?" The monk spoke in a low voice. "Not only will it bring misfortune to you, it will bring misfortune to the people around you as well. It can be said that you'll suffer misfortune for the rest of your life with this cause of misfortune on you." When he spoke up to this point, he seemed to have thought of something, and his brows knit together slightly. "Wait, how could you have possibly survived until now?" The corners of Yi Xian's eyes twitched. "What the hell is that?" Meanwhile, the monk took a deep and long glance at Yi Xian, and then he said, "Young man, you're not simple at all." Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. "Senior, can this cause of misfortune be removed?" The monk shook his head. "It can't be removed. Not to mention removing it, I can't even touch it." As he spoke, he gazed at the monk who stood before Yi Xian. "Wu Wang, let's not touch this karma." Yi Xian fell silent. Obviously, the monk before him had sensed the karma on him. But the monk was very simple. Yi Xian said with a smile, "Guys, goodbye." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Even though he was thick-skinned, he wasn't shameless. At this moment, a monk suddenly said, "Hold on." Yi Xian looked at the person who spoke. It was a monk who wore 2 strands of Buddha beads on his head. The monk's face was rough, and his eyes were spirited. He exuded an imposing aura without being angry. Everyone looked at the monk with the Buddha beads, and the monk looked at the monk in the kasaya. "Zhui Ming, you said that he has the cause of misfortune on him?" The monk in the kasaya nodded, "Yes." The monk with the Buddha beads smiled and said, "Then have you ever thought about the problem of him being able to live until now despite having the cause of misfortune on him?" The monk in the kasaya fell silent. The monk with the Buddha beads looked at Yi Xian. "He has the cause of misfortune, but he's able to live until now. What does this mean?" "It means that he might also have great fortune." Zhui Ming frowned slightly. "Misfortune, fortune?" The monk with the Buddha beads smiled and said, "They can coexist. The cause of misfortune is man-made, so naturally, fortune can also be man-made." As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian once more. "Little friend, if I'm not wrong, you have an expert behind you, right?" Yi Xian said seriously, "To tell you the truth, I do have an expert behind me." The monk with the Buddha beads looked at Yi Xian. "For him to be able to help you resist the cause of misfortune, he's not simple." Yi Xian smiled and did not speak. At this moment, he felt a little upset in his heart. This woman rarely saw him, but he did not know how much she had sacrificed for him. He knew that it was Qing who had helped him resist the cause of misfortune. But where was she now? At this moment, the nearby monk Wu Wang suddenly said, "Since he is here, then it must be fate." The monk with the Buddha beads nodded slightly. "If there is fate, then good results will naturally be born." The monk in the kasaya glanced at Yi Xian but did not speak. Wu Wang walked in front of Yi Xian. "Little friend, to reach self-release, you must first understand what the Tao is. Do you know what the Tao is?" After a moment of silence, Yi Xian said, "The Tao follows the laws of nature." Wu Wang smiled. "That's right, but you need to understand the Tao in more detail. The simplest meaning of the Tao is that all things have their own trajectory. It can also be said to be a change in the movement of things. In the following period of time, the monks took turns to explain to Yi Xian what the Dai was. It had to be said that Yi Xian had gained a lot. At the very least, he had a general understanding of the self-release realm. And the self-release realm was not that mysterious in his heart, it was just like an ordinary realm. However, he also knew that this was not the true self-release realm. He was still curious about the true self-release realm. Just like this, time passed day by day. During this period of time, Yi Xian listened to the preaching of the high monks day and night. About 5 days later, Yi Xian sat down and the monks had already left. This was all they could do. Whether or not he could comprehend himself and reach the self-release realm depended on Yi Xian himself. As for the abbot and Jiju, they had been guarding outside the hall. Actually, they were somewhat conflicted. They wanted Yi Xian to break through to the self-release realm, but they were also afraid that Yi Xian would break through to the self-release realm. This was because once Yi Xian broke through to the self-release realm, at that time, Yi Xian's threat would be very terrifying. It had to be known that Yi Xian still had the super divine item world prison pagoda. However, they also hoped that Yi Xian would break through to the self-release realm. This way, they would know the whereabouts of the Dao scripture. Dao world. At this time, a major event happened in the Dao world. The Dao world had formed an alliance. The Dao World Alliance. In this alliance, with the Immortal Pavilion at the head, there were over 100 factions gathered. Among them, there were 52 self-release realm experts. 52 self-release realm experts. This lineup was very terrifying. On this day, a mysterious man suddenly came to the Immortal Pavilion. In the hall, the Immortal Pavilion Master, Jiang Yu, looked at the mysterious man in front of him. The mysterious man said something in a low voice. About 15 minutes later, Jiang Yu clenched his fists, and a trace of killing intent flashed in his eyes. Fifth Dimension Tendo. Are you sure she did it? The mysterious man took out an item. When he saw that item, the Immortal Pavilion Master's pupils suddenly constricted. It's you. P.S. I have to think of ways to cheat monthly votes every day. These days are too difficult. But now, I find that as long as I don't add updates, don't even think about adding votes. No matter how much I cheat, it's useless, brother. Introduce me to a rich woman. I don't want to work hard anymore. I want to rely on my face to make a living. Chapter 1255. Inside the palace, Jiang Yu was incomparably shocked. He did not expect that the power would actually make a move. It seems like he still underestimated the temptation of the Dao scripture. The mysterious man had already left, but Jiang Yu was caught in a dilemma. The other party told him that it was the fifth dimension Tendo who made a move. Then came the problem. The fifth dimension Tendo actually had such terrifying strength. It could silently teleport the Pope away. How terrifying was this? And now, the power came to tell him about this matter. It was very simple. The other party wanted him to find trouble with the fifth dimension Tendo. The other party wanted to use him as a tool. Jiang Yu was silent for a long time, then shook his head and smiled. No rush, I am not in a hurry now. If it was before, he would definitely go frantically to find the fifth dimension Tendo. But now, he realized that this matter cannot be rushed. Everyone wanted the Dao scripture, and whoever was in a hurry would die first. At this moment, Jiang Yu suddenly felt very relaxed. When he was not too obsessed with the Dao scripture, his whole body relaxed. After the mysterious man left the Immortal Pavilion, he directly turned into a shadow and disappeared into the depths of the starry sky. But not long after, a woman suddenly appeared in front of him. The woman carried a roasted fish that was already half-eaten, and there was a fish bone stuck on the corner of her mouth. The person who came was Moon Yanyan. Seeing Moon Yanyan, the mysterious man's expression changed. He turned and directly disappeared into the end of the starry sky, but very quickly, he stopped because Moon Yanyan appeared in front of him again. Moon Yanyan looked at the mysterious man in front of him and smiled. Continue to run. The mysterious man said in a deep voice, Your Honor, I have no intention to offend you. Moon Yanyan smiled. It seems like you did not take my words seriously. The mysterious man looked at Moon Yanyan. Your Honor, our goal is only the Yi Xian, not your honor. Why does your honor have to interfere in this matter? Mu Niannian sighed. To be honest, I am interfering in this matter for your own good. The mysterious man frowned. What do you mean? Mu Niannian glanced at the mysterious man and shook his head. You should be glad that I'm the one who intervened. If that woman had interfered, she wouldn't have told you not to come, but to kill you all. In all honesty, you should be thanking me. I've indirectly saved your godly kingdom of Shumia. The mysterious man looked at Mu Niannian without saying a word. Obviously, he didn't believe it. Mu Niannian shook his head and smiled. I've done a good deed, but you still view me as an enemy. It's so hard. With that, she took out a long saber. Come, I'll allow you to run 300 feet first. Without hesitation, the mysterious man turned and ran. He was extremely fast and arrived in front of the Tao world's barrier of the universe in the blink of an eye. However, just as he was about to enter the barrier of the universe, a saber suddenly tore through the sky. Before the mysterious man could react, the saber directly cut his neck. A bloody head flew into the air. It was incomparably bloody. The mysterious man's eyes were wide open, filled with helplessness and shock. The Supreme Lord's strength was even more terrifying than he had expected. In the distant starry sky, Mu Niannian shrugged, put away the saber, and continued to eat the fish. At this time, Ling Er's voice suddenly sounded. They won't take this lying down. Mu Niannian smiled. It's all right, they won't dare to act recklessly for the time being. Ling Er asked, what about in the future? Mu Niannian said softly, in the future, it's his own business. In front of the Tao world's cosmic barrier, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared in front of the mysterious man's corpse. This person was the godly kingdom of Shumi's prime minister, Fang Tangshi. Fang Tangshi looked at the corpse for a long time before he turned around and saw a white-robed man standing in front of him. The white-robed man's long hair draped over his shoulders, and his hands were behind his back. His expression was calm and dignified. Fang Tangshi asked, Brother Song, what do you think? This person was the famous Supreme Wu of the godly kingdom of Shumi, in charge of the godly kingdom's most elite heaven-inspire army. Wu Ji glanced at the mysterious man's body and said softly, he should be at that level. Upon hearing this, Fang Tangshi fell silent, and his expression became even more solemn. Wu Ji looked into the depths of the starry sky. At this time, Mu Niannian, who was grilling fish, suddenly looked up, and the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. Want to fight? Wu Ji didn't waste any time and punched out. With this punch, a fist mark tore through space and blasted straight at Mu Niannian. This fist mark contained boundless killing intent, and this killing intent was like a dreadful beast that no one dared to look directly at. Moreover, this fist mark also contained 3 types of Tao laws. Killing Tao law, fist intent Tao law, overbearing Tao law. All 3 types of Tao laws had reached their limits. This punch was no longer within the Tao. In the starry sky, Mu Niannian put down the grilled fish in her hand. When the fist mark arrived in front of her, she took a step forward, and the space around her directly became illusory. When the fist mark arrived in front of her, she suddenly pointed out with a finger, and this finger directly touched the powerful fist mark. Bang! In an instant, the fist mark vanished without a trace. Everything vanished into thin air. The entire starry sky returned to calm. Wu Ji took a deep and long glance at Mu Niannian, and then he said, let's go. As soon as he finished speaking, both he and Fang Tangshi instantly became illusory. The corners of Mu Niannian's mouth curled up slightly. You think you can come and go as you please? As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly clenched her right hand from afar. In an instant, Wu Ji and Fang Tangshi's illusory figures actually started to gradually become material. Their expressions changed when they witnessed this scene. Suddenly, Wu Ji withdrew a broken saber and slashed it forward, and a strand of saber energy tore through space and arrived in front of Mu Niannian. However, Mu Niannian merely waved her hand casually, and the saber energy vanished without a trace. Meanwhile, she'd appeared in front of Wu Ji and Fang Tangshi. However, a mysterious force suddenly appeared here. Mu Yanyan's brows knit together slightly. She raised her head and saw a tiny flying knife descending straight towards her. Mu Yanyan pressed her fingers together and pointed upwards. Bang! The space above her suddenly became illusory. However, the flying knife continued forward like a hot knife through butter. It tore through Mu Yanyan's force and instantly arrived above Mu Yanyan's head. However, it wasn't able to kill Mu Yanyan. The flying knife had stopped a few inches away from Mu Yanyan's head. To be more precise, it had been stopped by a strand of sword intent. Sword intent had appeared. Meanwhile, the flying knife suddenly became illusory and vanished. However, Wuxia and Xianxia had vanished as well. Mu Yanyan gazed at the universe barrier in front of her. After a moment of silence, she spoke softly, "There really isn't much time left." As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and left. The sixth dimension. At this moment, Yixian was still comprehending void escape. Moreover, the abbot and the others were still waiting outside the hall. About 5 days later, Yixian, who was sitting cross-legged in the hall, suddenly opened his eyes. All of a sudden, his aura began to grow stronger and stronger. After an unknown amount of time, Yixian suddenly stood up. The moment he stood up, the space he was in became illusory. A moment later, Yixian slowly closed his eyes and a powerful aura swept out from his body. However, this aura was quickly suppressed by a golden light. The power of Buddhist Dharma. At this moment, the 9th floor's voice suddenly sounded. Void escape. Yixian nodded. However, it's not the true void escape. The true void escape. Yixian furrowed his brows, because he realized that he was still within the path. His release of one was not the true release of one. The 9th floor suddenly said, "You've been taking big steps recently. Be careful not to pull your balls." Yixian, the 9th floor continued, "What you need to do now is to stabilize your realm and your body. Although your body is strong, it hasn't reached its limit." To be honest, the Buddhist Dharma in that ancient temple is quite good. You can learn more. Yixian nodded. During this period of time, he had also discovered this problem. That was, the Buddhist scriptures were very helpful in stabilizing his realm. Now, he was a bit curious about the Buddhist scriptures in the study room. The ancient temple cared about it so much. That Buddhist scripture must be a good thing. 5-dimensional Tendo. Yixian thought of Mu Yanyan. It seemed that he had to find a chance to talk to Mu Yanyan. As if thinking of something, Yixian suddenly said, "Big sister, can you help me hide my realm?" After a moment of silence, the big sister said, "Yes." Yixian asked, "Even those void release realm powerhouses can't see through it. Can I?" The big sister said, "Yes." After saying that, the Tao law in the pagoda suddenly trembled. Soon, a mysterious power sealed Yixian. Soon, his aura was hidden. Yixian suddenly said, "Hiding the void release realm is enough." He finally understood. Pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger was the way of the king. If the enemy knew that he was at the void release realm, they would definitely prepare 120% of their strength to deal with him. But if he was still at the origin returning realm shattering realm, they would underestimate him. After a moment, Yixian left the hall. As soon as he left the hall, he saw the 2 abbot. The abbot looked at Yixian and was stunned. "You didn't break through?" Yixian sighed softly, his expression dim. "Just a bit of luck." The abbot had a strange expression. In his opinion, Yixian should be able to reach the void release realm. This fellow was not only thick-skinned, his talent was also very strong. But he did not expect that Yixian had not broken through to the void release realm. In slight disbelief, the abbot sized up Yixian. From his aura, although Yixian's aura was much stronger than before, he was still at the origin returning realm shattering realm. At this time, Yixian suddenly said, "Actually, just a bit, just a bit." The abbot asked, "What do you mean?" Yixian sighed softly, "I've already touched that threshold, but because of my own body, I'm still a bit away from breaking through that critical point." As he spoke, he shook his head and sighed once more, feeling slightly disheartened. The abbot hesitated for a moment and then said, "Don't be discouraged. Since you've already touched that threshold, then reaching the void release realm is only a matter of time. During this period of time, you should stay in the temple and cultivate the Dharma. Yi Xian nodded, all right. Not long later, the abbot and the others left. Yi Xian was just about to leave when a voice suddenly resounded in his mind. Yi Xian was delighted, and then he vanished on the spot. Chapter 1256. Yi Xian arrived at a starry sky, where he saw Moon Yanyan. When he was below, he received Moon Yanyan's message. Yi Xian walked briskly to Moon Yanyan, smiling, Sister Nian, you're back. Sister Nian? Moon Yanyan smiled faintly, that's an interesting name. Yi Xian smiled sheepishly, then asked, Sister Nian, did you go to the Dao world during this time? Moon Yanyan nodded, yes. Yi Xian said seriously, the study house is in your hands, right? Moon Yanyan smiled, yes. But I can't return it to you now. Yi Xian quickly said, all right, don't return it to me. This thing was a hot potato in his hands. It was much safer in Moon Yanyan's hands than in his. Moon Yanyan suddenly said, come with me. Yi Xian glanced at Moon Yanyan, nodding, all right. Moon Yanyan walked towards the depths of the starry sky. Do you know what's above the Dao world? Yi Xian nodded, yes, the godly kingdom of Shumi. Moon Yanyan glanced at Yi Xian. Did those monks tell you about it? Yi Xian nodded, yes. Moon Yanyan laughed. Those monks are interesting. Yi Xian said solemnly, this godly kingdom of Shumi also wants the Dao scripture? Moon Yanyan nodded. The Dao scripture has more uses than you think. It should be said that the Dao world's Dao scripture is not complete. If I'm not wrong, the godly kingdom of Shumi also has the Dao scripture from heaven, but both are incomplete. Yi Xian said solemnly, I heard the Dao scripture has a total of 9 scrolls? Moon Yanyan smiled, yes. I have to say, this is indeed a wonderful book. Yi Xian looked at Moon Yanyan. Sister Nian, are you not interested in this scripture at all? Moon Yanyan roared with laughter and said, I have my own path. Why would I need someone else to guide me? Yi Xian gave Moon Yanyan a thumbs up. Sis, you're awesome. Moon Yanyan shook his head, I'm not powerful at all. For example, I really can't beat the plain-dressed woman. Yi Xian almost fainted when he heard that. Moon Yanyan suddenly laughed. What else do you know about Dao Yi? Yi Xian asked in a deep voice, what kind of place is the realm of extreme bliss? He was very curious about the pure land of bliss that the ancient temple often talked about. Moon Yanyan said, the realm of extreme bliss is a place where a group of monks stay. Of course, the monks there are different from here. The monks there have much higher dharma and cultivation than here. They are also much stronger. Saying that, she looked at Yi Xian, you've become a layman disciple of the ancient temple? Yi Xian nodded, yes. Moon Yanyan said softly, the ancient temple is still fine, but the Buddhism in the realm of extreme bliss is not so easy to fool. Of course, now that you have become a layman disciple of the ancient temple, it means that you are very likely to come into contact with that place in the future. If you come into contact with that place, remember, you must be very careful. Those bald donkeys are not simple, especially since they are also experts in karma spells. Yi Xian nodded, understood. Moon Yanyan said again, you also have to be careful of a group of people. Yi Xian quickly asked, what kind? Moon Yanyan looked at Yi Xian, a transmigrator. Yi Xian frowned slightly, the Milky Way realm? Moon Yanyan nodded, that place is a bit special. As far as I know, that place is guarded by a mysterious array and mysterious power. Ordinary people can't step into that place at all. However, they are also trapped in that place and cannot come into contact with the outside world. Of course, this is equivalent to protecting them. Yi Xian was a little puzzled. What do you mean? The corner of Moon Yanyan's mouth lifted slightly. The people in that place are actually very weak. In short, if you meet people from that place in the future, just be careful. Of course, there is no need to deliberately pay attention to them. Although they are special, you are even more special. Yi Xian asked, special? How am I special? Moon Yanyan laughed, you are special in every way. Yi Xian, Mu Nianyan continued, actually, this universe is indeed very big and boundless. There are many unknown existences. Yi Xian said in a deep voice. That abbot also said that there is an ascension platform, which is that whirling world. Sister Nian, do you know that place? Mu Nianyan nodded. I know about Dao. Rumor has it that Dao scriptures came from that place. Yi Xian asked, rumor? Mu Nianyan rolled her eyes at Yi Xian. Do you think that I know everything? Yi Xian smiled awkwardly. Mu Nianyan shook her head. I am not interested in investigating these things. For me, it is fine as long as it does not threaten the fifth dimension. Yi Xian asked again, is there really an underworld? Hearing this, Mu Nianyan suddenly frowned and looked at Yi Xian. Did that bald donkey also say that? Yi Xian nodded. After a moment of silence, Mu Nianyan said, indeed there is. Yi Xian quickly asked, what kind of world is it? Mu Nianyan said lightly, a very scary place. Saying that, she pointed at herself. Do you think I am powerful? Yi Xian nodded quickly. Powerful, very powerful. Mu Nianyan looked at Yi Xian. I am not willing to provoke that place. Yi Xian was silent. Obviously, this underworld was very scary. Mu Nianyan said again, that place is not simple. I also hope that you do not provoke that place. When the plain-dressed woman was still here, it was fine if you provoked it. But now that she is gone, if you provoke that place, you will be killed. Yi Xian smiled awkwardly. I won't provoke you. Mu Nianyan shook her head. My intuition tells me that you will definitely provoke it. Yi Xian was a little puzzled. Why? Mu Nianyan said, you have the cause of adversity on you. The worse the situation, the easier it is for you to encounter it. It would be fine if you did not know about it, but the problem is that you know about it now. So, my thinking is that you will definitely come into contact with that place, and it will most likely be an evil fate. Yi Xian was speechless. Mu Nianyan said softly, you really make me worry. Yi Xian said in a low voice, Nianyan, you are so powerful. Do you know who gave me this cause of adversity? Mu Nianyan shook her head. I don't know. Yi Xian asked, can you investigate? Mu Nianyan looked at Yi Xian. Yes. Yi Xian was about to speak when Mu Nianyan said, we can investigate, but something bad will happen. Yi Xian frowned. What do you mean? Mu Nianyan laughed. It's like a tumor growing on an ordinary person's body. What do you think will happen if it is cut off? Yi Xian said in a low voice, you will die. Mu Nianyan nodded. The cause of calamity is similar to this. When we investigated, if we investigate, the cause of adversity may completely erupt. Once it erupts, my intuition tells me that something bad will happen. Yi Xian said in a low voice, that is to say, no matter what I do, I will not be able to change my bad fate, right? Mu Nianyan suddenly patted Yi Xian's head. Idiot, do you know why you are able to live until now? Yi Xian said in a low voice, because of the plain-dressed woman. Mu Nianyan shook her head. It's not just because of her, but also because you are constantly striving to become stronger. I can put it this way, the plain-dressed woman once gave you a chance to choose. If you choose to be ordinary, you will definitely be able to live a rich life, because she can completely guard this universe and ensure your safety for 100 years. However, you chose the martial Dao. Since you have chosen this path, she can only accompany you to walk out of that place. And the martial Dao can only be walked by yourself. At most, she will be your Dao protector. Saying that, she looked at Yi Xian. You are actually constantly changing your fate. It should be said that every decision you make can change your fate. Among all living beings, many people are born into ordinary families, and many people start with a golden key. It can be said that this is very unfair, because some people's ending point is just others' starting point. However, everyone has the ability to change their fate. If your fate is not good, then it is fate that is unfair. But if your fate is not good, then it is your own problem. Yi Xian asked back, why are some people's lives good, and some people's lives bad? Mu Nianyan looked at Yi Xian. When you walk, you might inadvertently step on an ant. Let me ask you, can that ant ask itself why its fate is not good? Yi Xian fell silent. Moon Yin softly said, Yi Xian, some people's bad fate is man-made, but many more people's bad fate is completely fate. And fate is uncertain, unknown. You don't know who this unknown will choose. If you are chosen, you can only try to change this fate, but you can't protest. That's not right. If you work hard to change your fate, it is equivalent to protesting. Humans are most afraid of blaming the heavens, feeling that the heavens are unfair. Saying that, she pointed below, look at the countless ants walking under the starry sky, and you can casually take away a life with your foot. Have you ever thought of trampling them to death? No, when you trample them to death, you might not even know that you have trampled them to death. You humans, not only humans but also all living things, are equivalent to ants in the eyes of certain existences. Do you understand what I mean? Yi Xian nodded. I understand. Moon Yin continued, in this fifth dimension calamity, many people will die, but there will also be some people who will survive. Simply put, when you have enough strength, you can change your own fate. Just like me, if I didn't have strength, I would have long been captured and imprisoned by others to provide spiritual qi. As for the fifth dimension, it will also become a spiritual qi supply field for others. I really like the saying of humans, constantly strive to become stronger. This is a kind of spirit, and also a kind of culture. However, humans tend to ignore this spirit and culture. Yi Xian looked at Moon Yin. Sister Yin, I understand. Moon Yin faintly smiled. It's good that you understand. Remember, don't complain that you have a calamity on your body. Nothing is absolute. As long as you use it well, many bad things can become good things. Mentality is very important. Yi Xian said with a smile, I will remember what you said. Moon Yin lightly patted Yi Xian's shoulder, then licked her lips. Sister is a bit hungry, go and catch some fish for me. After eating, we will do something big. A very, very big thing, your sister. I will go on a killing spree. Yi Xian. P.S. Why are there so few monthly votes? I think it might also be fate. Chapter 1257. Something big. Yi Xian's expression was a little strange. He didn't ask what it was and went to catch some fish. Soon, Yi Xian caught 2 fish and cooked them for Moon Yin. The starry sky was deep and quiet. Yi Xian and Moon Yin sat opposite each other. In front of them was a bonfire, and Yi Xian was roasting fish. Under normal circumstances, fire couldn't burn in the starry sky. However, neither of them were ordinary people. Not to mention burning in the starry sky, they could even blow up the starry sky. After a while, Yi Xian picked up a roasted fish and handed it to Moon Yin. Big Sister Yin, you said you were going to do something big. What is it? Moon Yin licked the roasted fish and said, to the godly kingdom of Shumi. Yi Xian was stunned. Moon Yin looked at Yi Xian. Do you dare to go? Yi Xian blinked. Big Sister Yin, are you playing some dirty trick again? Moon Yin rolled her eyes at Yi Xian. Am I that kind of person in your heart? Yi Xian smiled. Big Sister Yin is a good person. Moon Yin smiled. I'm going this time to buy some time for you. You can still deal with the Dao world and the ancient temple now, but that's under the condition that the godly kingdom of Shumi doesn't interfere. Yi Xian said solemnly, they've already interfered? Moon Yin nodded. Yi Xian looked at Moon Yin. Big Sister Yin, did you stop them? Moon Yin smiled. I persuaded them to go back. Yi Xian was speechless. Moon Yin continued, however, they won't let it go so easily. So, I want to take you there. Firstly, it's to solve this problem. Because if we don't intimidate them, although they won't do it openly, they will definitely cause trouble behind our backs. The second is to show you the world. See the world? Yi Xian nodded. All right. Needless to say, Huang Xiaolong really wanted to experience this godly kingdom of Shumi for himself. After Moon Yin finished the grilled fish, she looked at Yi Xian and said, the grilled fish is very good. Yi Xian smiled and said, I'll roast them for you often in the future. Moon Yin roared with laughter and said, let's go. To the godly kingdom of Shumi. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, should I explain it to him? Moon Yin shook his head. No, we'll be back soon. As soon as she finished speaking, she brought Yi Xian along and vanished on the spot. It didn't take long for them to arrive at the Dao world. Yi Xian noticed that it wasn't difficult for Mu Niannian to ascend the Dao world at all. Moreover, he finally understood why it was so difficult for people from the lower dimensions to ascend the Dao world when he passed through the universe barrier. It was because it was extremely terrifying. The slightest mistake could result in death. Of course, it wasn't a threat to him at all. His current body could only be described as abnormal. Mu Niannian was just about to break through the universe barrier when a voice resounded from the side. "You're Yi Xian?" Yi Xian turned around and saw a young woman standing not too far away from him. The young woman gazed at Yi Xian and blinked. "I'm Chen Yaoni." "Chen Yaoni." Yi Xian sized her up, and it wasn't long before he was visibly moved. This young woman was actually a Void Origin Realm expert. The young woman smiled and said, "I wanted to look for you, but I never expected that you would come here yourself." Yi Xian was a little surprised. "You know me?" The young woman shook her head. "I don't know you, but a big sister asked me to bring you a message." Yi Xian was a little curious. "Big sister?" The young woman said, "It's a big sister wearing a plain dress." "A plain dress woman?" Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "What did she say?" Chen Yaoni smiled and said, "She said that she's waiting for you above the clouds. You have to work hard." Above the clouds? Yi Xian was silent. He still remembered his agreement with the plain dress woman. Above the clouds? Yi Xian turned to look at the world barrier in front of him. "Niannian, is she over there?" Mu Niannian shook her head. "No." Yi Xian was about to speak when Mu Niannian said, "Don't ask me where she went. I don't know anyway." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. He really did miss the plain dress woman a little. At this moment, the young woman suddenly smiled and said, "Are you going over there?" Yi Xian collected his thoughts and nodded. "Yes." Chen Yaoni shook her head. "You can't go over because the universe barrier is very hard. You can't open it." At this moment, Mu Niannian suddenly drew a line with his finger. In an instant, the universe barrier cracked. Chen Yaoni was dumbfounded. "This?" Mu Niannian looked at Chen Yaoni. "You see, isn't this very simple?" Chen Yaoni blinked. "This, isn't it a little off?" Mu Niannian smiled and said, "What's wrong?" Chen Yaoni walked in front of the universe barrier. At this moment, the universe barrier had automatically closed. Chen Yaoni drew his sword and slashed. Boom! A powerful force blasted Chen Yaoni 10,000 feet away. Yi Xian's expression changed. At this moment, he suddenly realized that this universe barrier was not ordinary. The young woman in front of him was at the self-release realm. 10,000 feet away, Chen Yaoni glanced at her numb arm and then looked at Mu Niannian. "Why?" Mu Niannian asked seriously, "Do you want to know why?" Chen Yaoni hurriedly nodded. Mu Niannian smiled and said, "Because you're not strong enough." Chen Yaoni was a little unconvinced. "I'm the youngest self-release realm in the history of the Dao world." The corners of Mu Niannian's mouth curled up. "Is that so? Then why can't you open this universe barrier?" Chen Yaoni hesitated and then said, "I didn't eat today. I don't have enough strength." Yi Xian was speechless. "Haha." Mu Niannian laughed loudly. "I didn't eat. Little sister, you're so cute. Let me ask you, do you want to become a true self-release realm?" Chen Yaoni looked at Mu Niannian. "You can also see that I'm not a true self-release realm?" Mu Niannian nodded. "Yes." Chen Yaoni hesitated and then said, "Sister, do you have a way to let me reach a true self-release realm?" Mu Niannian nodded. "Yes." Chen Yaoni looked at Mu Niannian. "Then can you teach me?" Mu Niannian shook her head. "I can't." She pointed at Yi Xian. "But he can." Chen Yaoni glanced at Yi Xian and then shook her head. "He hasn't reached self-release realm yet." Mu Niannian smiled and said, "He has a Dao scripture." Yi Xian was speechless. Chen Yaoni said, "I've heard about it too." She looked at Yi Xian. "Do you really have a Dao scripture?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes." Chen Yaoni blinked. "Can you lend it to me to take a look?" Yi Xian also blinked. That's very precious. Qin Yaoni said seriously, after I reached self-release realm, I forgot about it. Yi Xian was speechless. Qin Yaoni said again, can you? Yi Xian smiled. I can't open the book room right now and can't get the Dao scripture inside. How about this, you follow me? After I can open the book room and get the Dao scripture, I'll lend it to you. What do you think? Qin Yaoni quickly said, really? Yi Xian said seriously, okay, I'll follow you. Qin Yaoni hurriedly said, okay, I'll follow you. Yi Xian looked at Mu Niannian. Mu Niannian smiled. We're going over there. Are you coming? Qin Yaoni hesitated. Grandpa said that it's very dangerous there. Mu Niannian smiled. Then you don't dare to go. Qin Yaoni snorted coldly. Who doesn't dare to? Let's go. Mu Niannian laughed. Let's go. She pointed with her finger. The universe barrier was cut open. The three of them disappeared into the universe barrier. At this time, the voice from the 9th floor suddenly sounded in Yi Xian's mind. This girl met you two super hoodwinkers? How unfortunate. Yi Xian was speechless. After entering the universe barrier, the three of them were sucked into a vortex by a powerful force. Space vortex. In the vortex, Mu Niannian's expression was calm. She was not affected in the slightest. But Yi Xian and Qin Yaoni were different. Their faces instantly turned pale. Yi Xian did not dare to be careless. He hurriedly urged his Vajra Buddha body. When the Vajra Buddha body appeared, he immediately felt much better. Yi Xian looked at Qin Yaoni. Qin Yaoni was surrounded by an invisible blade qi. The power of the space turbulence was unable to break through her blade qi. This girl is powerful. Yi Xian was shocked. Although this girl was not a true release one, her realm was the same as him. They were both fake release one. Moreover, this girl was at the release one realm. Most importantly, this lass was still young. Mu Niannian also looked at Qin Yaoni. At this time, Yi Xian's voice sounded in her mind. Sister Nian, what do you think of this girl? Mu Niannian smiled. Not bad. Not bad. Yi Xian glanced at Mu Niannian, not saying a word. Mu Niannian continued, talent is important, but temperament is even more important. This girl has not experienced a great calamity. Her temperament and temperament are lacking. In the future, there will be a calamity. Yi Xian fell silent. Temperament. That's right, this girl is clearly well protected. She lacks worldly wisdom. At this time, Qin Yaoni suddenly asked, where are we going? Mu Niannian looked at Qin Yaoni, smiling, to the godly kingdom of Shumi. Do you know of the godly kingdom of Shumi? Qin Yaoni shook her head. I don't know. She hesitated for a moment before asking, can we still go back? Mu Niannian smiled. Yes. Just as Qin Yaoni was about to speak, a powerful force suddenly swept toward them from afar. Yi Xian looked into the distance. In the space turbulence, a figure suddenly broke through the void. It was a middle-aged man. The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian's group and bellowed, who are you? How dare you trespass into the godly kingdom of Shumi? Could it be? Yi Xian was about to speak when Mu Niannian suddenly waved her right hand. Boom! Before the middle-aged man could react, his head flew into the air, blood splattering everywhere. Yi Xian and Qin Yaoni were stunned. They looked at Mu Niannian. Mu Niannian chuckled, we're here to fight, not to chat. Yi Xian, Qin Yaoni hesitated, then said, big sister, I think before you kill him, you should let him finish. Yi Xian, Mu Niannian looked at Qin Yaoni, smiling, why? Qin Yaoni glanced at Mu Niannian, hesitated for a moment, then said, if someone kills me and doesn't let me finish, I'll regret it. Yi Xian. Chapter 1258. Needless to say, Yi Xian was at a loss for words at this moment. This Qin Yaoni's way of thinking was really out of the ordinary. Mu Niannian also shook his head with a smile. What an adorable little guy. She walked over to Mu Niannian's side, and then she glanced towards the distance and said, I feel that it's quite dangerous. Yi Xian looked up. He also sensed danger at the moment. Mu Niannian smiled, someone's coming. Just as her voice fell, a short distance in front of them shook violently, and in the next moment, a middle-aged man appeared in front of them. This person was none other than the godly kingdom of Shumi's prime minister, Fang Tangshi. Fang Tangshi looked at Mu Niannian, "Great venerable one." Mu Niannian smiled, "We meet again." Fang Tangshi's solemn voice sounded, "Great venerable one wants to challenge my godly kingdom of Shumi?" The corner of Mu Niannian's mouth curved upwards. "Can't I?" Fang Tangshi looked at Mu Niannian, not saying a word. In truth, the godly kingdom of Shumi wasn't afraid of this woman in front of them. However, they didn't want to risk their lives against Mu Niannian. If this kind of expert disregarded everything and fought the godly kingdom of Shumi, it would be very, very damaging to the godly kingdom of Shumi. At this time, Mu Niannian suddenly took out Yi Xian's study, smiling. "Tell His Majesty, this study is in my hands, and inside this study is the Tao scripture." Fang Tangshi looked at Mu Niannian. At this moment, he couldn't understand Mu Niannian's meaning. What was she trying to do? Arrogant? Confident? Fang Tangshi's expression grew more solemn. An expert like Mu Niannian would never be stupid or arrogant. Since she dared to come here, there was only one explanation: she was confident. Mu Niannian suddenly laughed. "Didn't you want the Tao scripture? I've brought it to you." Fang Tangshi looked at Mu Niannian. "Great venerable one, please wait." With that said, he turned and left. At this time, Mu Niannian suddenly said, "No need." Fang Tangshi looked at Mu Niannian. Mu Niannian smiled and said, "I'm here to kill, not to negotiate." After saying that, she clenched her right hand at Fang Tangshi. Boom! The space around Fang Tangshi instantly turned illusory. Fang Tangshi's expression changed drastically. He wanted to retreat, but it was still too late. That powerful force trapped him. At this moment, a flying knife suddenly appeared above Mu Niannian's head. When the flying dagger appeared, Yi Xian and Xianyao's expressions changed drastically. Danger! This was what the two of them were feeling at this moment. Yi Xian's expression was incomparably grave. His intuition told him that his body could not withstand this flying dagger. Mu Niannian's lips curled into a cold smile. She ignored the flying dagger and clenched her right hand. Boom! That Tangshi was directly killed. His divine soul was destroyed, because Fang Tangshi's entire body was erased. At this time, the flying dagger above Mu Niannian's head stopped, blocked by a wisp of sword intent. Mu Niannian looked into the distance, snickering, "Do you really think this broken knife of yours can stop me?" Saying so, she snapped her fingers. Boom! The flying dagger shattered into pieces. Mu Niannian looked into the distance, snickering, "Come, let me see how much your godly kingdom of Shumi is willing to pay to kill me." Saying so, she turned and walked away. Yi Xian and Chen Yaoni hastily followed. Chen Yaoni nudged Yi Xian with his arm. "She's so strong." Yi Xian nodded. It was obvious that Mu Niannian was stronger than he expected. Just how strong was Mu Niannian? At this time, a white light suddenly appeared in front of them. Soon, the three of them passed through the white light and arrived above a sea. At first glance, all they could see were tall mountains. Yi Xian looked at Mu Niannian. Mu Niannian smiled. "This is the godly kingdom of Shumi, also known as the godly world of Shumi." Yi Xian hesitated. "I heard that the godly kingdom of Shumi's royal family has ancestral blood, is that right?" Mu Niannian laughed. "Yes, very powerful ancestral blood." Yi Xian hastened to ask, "Compared to my bloodline, which is stronger?" Mu Niannian winked. "How about I let you fight it out later?" Yi Xian pondered. "How about I let you fight it out later?" Mu Niannian laughed heartily. "Here it comes." Just as her voice fell, a middle-aged man appeared in the sky in front of them. Songji, the godly kingdom of Shumi's heaven-inspire army's commander. Songji looked at Mu Niannian. "Don't you think you're going too far?" Mu Niannian laughed. "You're not convinced? Come and hit me then." Songji's eyes narrowed, his right hand clenched into a fist, but at this time, Mu Niannian punched out, "Scram." His voice was like thunder, shaking heaven and earth. His voice was laced with fist intent. Under this punch, Songji's expression changed greatly. He crossed his arms and suddenly pushed them forward. Heaven shaking earth. Just as his voice fell, an illusory 10,000 zhang tall mountain appeared in front of Song Ji. This mountain spanned across heaven and earth like an impenetrable fortress. However, as Mu chanted, the fist arrived, causing the illusory mountain to tremble violently. Then, it cracked open and shattered. Boom! Song Ji retreated 10,000 zhang away in an instant. Directly crushed. Yi Xian glanced at Mu Nian, inwardly shocked. How strong is this Sister Nian? Chen Yaoni was extremely shocked as well. Unlike Yi Xian, she was shocked inwardly, and her eyes were wide open. At this moment, she wasn't confident anymore. She'd always felt that she was very, very formidable, but now, she suddenly felt that she wasn't so formidable anymore. In the distant sky, Song Ji stared fixedly at Mu Nian, and he was extremely shocked as well. The strength of this woman had greatly exceeded his expectations. I'm not a match for her at all. Song Ji's body gradually became illusory when he thought up to this point. I'm leaving. The corners of Mu Nian's mouth curled up slightly. You want to leave? As soon as she finished speaking, she was about to attack. Suddenly, 4 middle-aged men with sword chests on their backs appeared not too far away from Mu Nian. The man with the sword chest in the lead stared at Mu Nian. The immortal sword sect seeks your guidance. As soon as he finished speaking, he pointed with his fingers, attack! 4 sword howls suddenly resounded, and then 4 flying swords suddenly shot into the sky. The flying swords were like 4 shooting stars that slashed down swiftly like bolts of lightning. Yi Xian's expression gradually became solemn when he witnessed this scene, because all 4 of them had actually attained the unrestrained Sword Dao. Their attainments in the Sword Dao were actually so high. The 4 flying swords slashed at Mu Nian from 4 different angles. Needless to say, they were extremely formidable, and they swept through everything in their path. Mu Nian shook her head. How showy! As soon as she finished speaking, she stomped her right foot lightly against the ground. Bang! In an instant, the 4 swords stopped in midair, and then she spun her hand lightly, slash. As soon as she finished speaking, the 4 swords turned around and slashed at the 4 swordsmen. The expressions of the 4 swordsmen changed drastically when they witnessed this scene, and they were just about to control the 4 flying swords when their speed suddenly rose explosively. This. Before the 4 swordsmen could react, their heads were sent flying. Blood spurted out like a fountain. Blood spurted out like a fountain. Mu Nian's right hand waved. The 4 flying swords fell in front of Yi Xian. Take them. Yi Xian quickly put away the 4 flying swords. These were good toys. At this time, Mu Nian looked up at the horizon, a smile on his face. Ruler of Shumi, not coming out to meet me? Or do you want to continue sending people to their deaths? At this time, a silhouette appeared in the sky. It was a middle-aged man. The middle-aged man was clad in a white dragon robe, with a dragon crown on his head, exuding an invisible pressure. Not only that, there were golden dragons hovering around him. Yi Xian asked softly, "This is the ruler of the godly kingdom of Shumi?" Mu Nian nodded, replying with a smile, "Yes." Yi Xian looked at the ruler of the godly kingdom of Shumi. He couldn't sense the other party's aura. Obviously, the other party's strength was above self-release realm. This also meant that Mu Nian's strength was also above self-release realm. Above self-release realm. Thinking of this, Yi Xian's scalp went numb. This woman had reached above self-release realm, but she was still in the 5th dimension. How could those people from the 5th dimension fight her? Forget about the 5th dimension, even the Dao world couldn't fight her. This elder sister Nian was too abnormal. Yi Xian was shocked, because he had guessed Mu Nian's strength. In his heart, this Mu Nian might be at the peak of self-release realm, a true self-release realm, but he didn't expect that the other party was already above self-release realm. In the sky, the ruler of the godly kingdom of Shumi looked at Mu Nian. "Your Excellency is very arrogant." Mu Nian smiled. "I'll give you 2 choices. 1, in 3 years, no one from the godly kingdom of Shumi is allowed to step into the Dao world. 2, kill me now. Of course, it's also possible that I'll kill you." The godly kingdom of Shumi's ruler laughed. Let me experience your excellency's strength. Mu Nianyan nodded. Fine. Saying so, she opened her palm. Sword, come. As her voice fell, a sword suddenly flew out from Yi Xian's body, appearing in Mu Nianyan's hand in the next moment. Tendo sword. Mu Nianyan looked at Yi Xian, smiling. Watch carefully, see how your elder sister Nian uses a sword. As soon as she finished speaking, she raised her sword and slashed towards the sky. A sword chi pierced through the air. It was a very simple sword chi, flying out. Even Yi Xian couldn't see anything special about it. However, the godly kingdom of Shumi's ruler's face changed. His expression became incomparably solemn. At this time, the godly kingdom of Shumi's ruler suddenly opened his palm, then clenched it. Defend. As his voice fell, the golden dragon beside him suddenly roared, then turned into a golden light, blocking in front of him. The sword chi arrived. Boom! The golden light shattered, followed by a shrill scream that resounded in the sky. It was the golden dragon's. The golden dragon's voice was mixed with endless pain. As for the godly kingdom of Shumi's ruler himself, he retreated explosively, retreating tens of thousands of li, but the sword chi did not dissipate. As soon as the godly kingdom of Shumi's ruler stopped, his body crumbled, and at the same time, a sword chi appeared a zhang in front of him. The sword chi did not kill the godly kingdom of Shumi's ruler. At this time, countless experts appeared in the surroundings. Among them, there were more than 30 self-release realm experts. Besides them, there were some unknown experts, and more experts were rushing over here. Yi Xian's expression became incomparably solemn. This godly kingdom of Shumi was actually this terrifying. P.S. Asking for votes. Chapter 1259. Yi Xian hastily said, No, Sister Nian, you're here. The experts in the surroundings had extremely strange expressions on their faces as well. Of course, there was even more seriousness in their eyes. The godly kingdom of Shumi's heavenly lord was defeated with a single slash. At this moment, they were extremely shocked. Mu Nianyan smiled, ignoring the experts around her. She walked to the godly kingdom of Shumi's heavenly lord. I think we can talk now. What do you say? The godly kingdom of Shumi's heavenly lord looked at Mu Nianyan. Talk? In the end, he didn't choose to be stubborn. First, if he chose to be stubborn, he would die. Second, these people might not be able to keep this woman here. This woman was several times stronger than he expected. Hearing the godly kingdom of Shumi's heavenly lord's words, Mu Nianyan smiled. All right, my idea is simple. As long as I'm alive, you can't come looking for trouble with this little friend of mine, all right? The godly kingdom of Shumi's heavenly lord glanced at Yi Xian. Agreed. Mu Nianyan laughed. Good. Then she looked at Yi Xian. Let's go. Yi Xian was taken aback. They're leaving just like that? Mu Nianyan turned and left. Yi Xian and Chen Yaoni quickly followed. At this time, dozens of divine senses suddenly formed a net and enveloped Mu Nianyan's group. Mu Nianyan looked around. Do you have a death wish? The experts around looked at Mu Nianyan without a word. Although there was fear in their eyes, there was no fear. Because there were too many people. The godly kingdom of Shumi's heavenly lord suddenly said, Let them go. Hearing this, the experts around retreated. Mu Nianyan turned to look at the godly kingdom of Shumi's heavenly lord, smiling. You might not believe it, but I'm doing this to save you. Because I have a good temper, and I'm reasonable. If it were someone else, you wouldn't be so lucky. Everyone. The godly MT Shumi's heavenly lord glared at Mu Nianyan, but at this time, Mu Nianyan had already left with Yi Xian's group. Get someone else to do it? Who would replace him? There was a trace of doubt in the godly kingdom's sovereign god's mind. At this time, Songji appeared in front of the godly kingdom of godly MD Shumi. His solemn voice sounded, Prime Minister Fong has been erased. The well of reincarnation cannot detect it. God Lord Shumi's eyes narrowed. She's much stronger than we imagined. Songji said in a deep voice. That Tao scripture? God Lord Shumi said softly. It's fine, we won't take it for now. As he spoke, he raised his head to look at the distant horizon and said in a light voice, If I'm not wrong, then those places have already found out about the appearance of the Dao scripture. I want to see if she can guard the 5 dimensions by herself. Dao scriptures. The people of the Dao world did not understand enough about the Dao scripture, which was actually the source of the martial Dao. In the past, when the heavens sent down the Dao scripture, it was not only the Dao world that sent it down, the godly kingdom of godly Mt Shumi also had it. Of course, this was something they found out later on. It was rumored that if one gathered all the pages of the Dao scripture, they could comprehend the true meaning of the martial Dao and become invincible. And the Dao scripture was said to have come from the Ascension platform. Inside the cosmos barrier, Mu Nianyan brought Yi Xian and Xianxia as they shuttled back and forth. Mu Nianyan looked at Yi Xian. What do you think? Yi Xian said in a deep voice, they're very strong. Mu Nianyan smiled. They're stronger than what you've seen. Because just now, there were at least 10 self-release realm experts. Moreover, there are some old monsters who haven't come out yet. Yi Xian, Xianxia suddenly said, Big sister, aren't you afraid? Mu Nianyan shook her head and smiled. What's there to be afraid of? Xianxia said with some excitement, You can kill them, right? Mu Nianyan laughed heartily. I can kill them, but there's no need. Xianxia was a little puzzled. Why? Mu Nianyan blinked. Because I crippled their divine lord with one sword strike. That's enough. Hearing this, Yi Xian understood. He knew why Mu Nianyan went to find Divine Lord Shumi as soon as he appeared in the godly kingdom of Shumi. Killing the chicken to warn the monkey. Heavily injuring Divine Lord Shumi with one sword strike, intimidating the surrounding experts. Mu Nianyan glanced at Yi Xian, then said, Do you think they'll give up? Yi Xian thought about it, then shook his head. Mu Nianyan nodded. They definitely won't give up. I've thought about it. If I'm not wrong, they'll probably contact the other places in the Western Paradise to discuss how to deal with you. If they're cautious, they'll choose to act during the 5th dimension tribulation, because that's the most difficult time for us. Yi Xian asked, Then what should we do? Mu Nianyan blinked. That's a question you should be thinking about. In any case, if I can't beat them, I'll just run. Yi Xian, Mu Nianyan continued, In this half a year, you won't have much trouble or problems, but after this half a year, you won't be able to rest for even a moment. Yi Xian fell silent. Mu Nianyan softly said, I can only help you fight for this half a year. In this half a year, do as you see fit. Yi Xian looked at Mu Nianyan. Sister Nian, thank you. Mu Nianyan smiled. What are you thanking me for? Yi Xian hesitated, then said, Sister Nian, if they want to act, they'll definitely think of a way to deal with you. Mu Nianyan looked at Yi Xian, smiled. What's the use of dealing with me? I can't beat them, but I can run away, right? But you won't have the chance to run. Do you understand what I mean? Yi Xian nodded. I understand. Mu Nianyan softly said, Half a year. Remember, you only have half a year. As for what you do in this half a year, that's your business. Don't even think about finding the plain-dressed woman. She's not in the Western Paradise. She should be in a place that even I don't know. Saying this, she looked at Yi Xian. Even I don't know. Do you know what this means? Yi Xian hesitated, then said, What does it mean? Mu Nianyan smiled. It means it's very troublesome. Yi Xian was about to speak, but they'd already left the universe barrier and appeared in the Dao world. Mu Nianyan took a deep breath and said, The taste of the 5th dimension is still better. I have some things to do, so don't come looking for me if there's nothing important during this period of time, and don't come looking for me if there's something, because I'm very busy. In short, take care of yourself. Saying this, she vanished into thin air. On the spot, Yi Xian was silent. Half a year. He only had half a year now. And his enemy wasn't a void escape realm, but above it. But this time was different. This time, Mu Nianyan had delayed half a year for him. Half a year. Yi Xian looked up into the sky and said softly, Half a year, what can I do? Xianxia suddenly said, Become stronger. Become stronger. Yi Xian smiled, Indeed. Saying this, he looked at Xianxia. Will you come with me to the 5th dimension? Xianxia hesitated, then said, I'm afraid grandfather won't let me. Yi Xian blinked. Don't you want to be as strong as that sister? Xianxia blinked. Are you Dao scripture? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Xianxia hesitated, then said, Will you really let me see it? Yi Xian smiled. If I can open that study room, I'll definitely let you see it. But I have to remind you, it's very dangerous to go down with me. Moreover, I want you to go down with me because I hope you can help me fight. Of course, if I don't die, what can I do? Open the Dao scripture, I'll definitely share it with you. Xianxia smiled. You're very frank. I like your frankness. I'll go down with you. Yi Xian laughed. Let's go. Saying this, he disappeared with Xianxia. Yi Xian didn't directly return to the fifth dimension. Instead, he brought Xianxia to the Demon Path clan. In front of the Demon Path hall, when Emo Zhong saw Yi Xian, he was overjoyed and quickly said, Son-in-law, you're here? Yi Xian smiled. Senior Emo Zhong, I'm not your family's son-in-law. Emo Zhong said in a deep voice, You are. Yi Xian was speechless. At this time, Emo Zhong suddenly said, Son-in-law, please follow me. Saying this, he brought Yi Xian and Xianxia to the Demon Path hall. Inside the hall, Yi Xian saw Demon Xiao Dao. Yi Xian walked in front of Demon Xiao Dao and said with a smile, Are you all right? Demon Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, Very good. What about you? Yi Xian smiled lightly, Very good. Demon Xiao Dao looked at Xianxia, and Yi Xian quickly introduced her. She's Xianxia, we just met. Xianxia. Hearing this, Demon Xiao Dao and Emo Zhong's expressions changed. Demon Xiao Dao looked at Xianxia. You're that Xianxia. Xianxia blinked. You know me. Demon Xiao Dao said in a deep voice, Aren't you our Dao world's #1 monster? Xianxia smiled. Yes, I'm the Dao world's #1 monster. Yi Xian was speechless. Demon Xiao Dao looked at Xianxia and then looked at Yi Xian. Did you come alone? Yi Xian shook his head. I came with Moon. She took me to the Meru Kingdom. Then, he told him what had happened in the Meru Kingdom. Demon Xiao Dao was silent for a long time before he said, What do you think? Yi Xian smiled bitterly. I only have half a year. What else can I think? Demon Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian. Why did she give you half a year? Have you thought about this? Yi Xian fell silent. Demon Xiao Dao said softly, No matter what the reason is, you just have to remember that you have to cherish this half a year. You might have to face more things in half a year. Do you understand what I mean? Yi Xian nodded. Understood. Demon Xiao Dao nodded slightly. Deep in her eyes, there was a trace of worry. In a certain part of the fifth dimension, Moon was walking alone. In her right hand was a small roasted fish. But she didn't eat it. At this time, Moon coughed. This cough caused her face to turn pale. Ling suddenly said, You're injured. Moon shook her head. They can't hurt me. It's the cause of disaster. Then she looked at her right hand. In her right palm, there was a shallow blood stain. Moon mouth curled up. Interesting. You want to kill me so openly? Ling said, Is it because you interfered with his matters? Moon said softly, I bought him half a year. This is the price. Said anxiously, You're so powerful. Can't you cut off this cause of disaster? Moon looked at the light red blood stain in her hand. But I can't do that. Ling was puzzled. Why? Moon smiled. If it was before, I would definitely play with this cause of disaster. But now, Sai, my body can't take it. Moreover, big trouble is coming. I can't deal with this cause of disaster. Then she looked around and said softly, I don't know how long I can see this beautiful world. Chapter 1260. Yi Xian had returned to the five-dimensional universe. For him, he had to cherish every day in the future. Half a year. After being enlightened by Demon Xiao Dao, he understood what this half a year meant. Half a year. It was not a lot, but it was not a small amount. Of course, the premise was that he had to make good use of this half a year. Within the Fifth Dimension Alliance Palace, Guan Yin was reporting to Yi Xian about the matters of the Fifth Dimension. After a long time, Yixian softly said, "We are developing very quickly." In the fifth dimension, there were 5 self-release realm experts. They were Xiao Qi, Arrow, Anlanxiu, Zhang Wenxiu, and senior sister Lu. What surprised him was that Ajio and Sidu had not reached self-release realm. It was not that they could not reach it, but that they did not want to. Their goal was to truly reach self-release realm. Moreover, although they were not at self-release realm, their battle strength had already surpassed ordinary self-release realm experts. There were already more than 50 half-step self-release realm experts, and there were countless origin-returning realm-shattering realm experts. The current overall strength of the fifth dimension was several times stronger than before. Guan Yin said in a deep voice, "From now on, our improvement might slow down." Yixian softly said, "We should also slow down." Continuing to improve so quickly was not a good thing. The current fifth dimension was already like a seedling being spoiled by excessive enthusiasm. Guan Yin looked at Yixian. "Should we slow down?" Yixian nodded. "Everyone can slow down, but we cannot stop cultivating. During this period of time, everyone should properly stabilize their martial path realm." Guan Yin nodded. "Understood." Yixian looked at Guan Yin and smiled. "Lady Guan, our future might not be peaceful." Guan Yin said in a deep voice, "I have already made my mental preparations." Yixian nodded. "During this period of time, you can also properly cultivate. As for the matters of the fifth dimension alliance, you can slowly hand them over to others." Guan Yin nodded. "All right." Actually, she needed to stop for a while. Because she had been dealing with everything by herself, this had seriously delayed her cultivation. Otherwise, she would have had a high chance of reaching self-release. After chatting with Guan Yin for a while, Yixian left the hall and went to Tendo's pawn shop alone. The pawn shop was completely empty. Yixian sat behind the counter and took out a small wooden figurine. Looking at the wooden figurine in his hand, his thoughts gradually drifted away. Yi Ling. Where the hell did she go? It could be said that Yi Ling was the most important person in his life. Initially, Yixian's thoughts were very simple. He wanted to live well and let his sister live well. However, later on, he slowly realized that things were not so simple. First was his identity. Thinking of his identity gave him a headache. Prophet, Qingya, the Azure Robe Man. There was still another unknown. He was actually so complicated. Although he had always said that he was Yixian, he knew that things were not that simple. For example, if not for the plain-dressed woman, he would not be Yixian but Yi Qingji. Reincarnation. In the past, he did not believe in the so-called past and present lives. But now, he had no choice but to believe. When people cultivated to a certain level, reversing life and death might be a bit difficult, but interfering with one's own reincarnation was not a problem. As for Yi Ling, he felt that her identity might not be simple. Actually, he had a question in his heart. That was, he had the crazy demon bloodline, but Yi Ling did not. There was also Du Guxian. When she left, she said that she was looking for someone, but this time, it was as if she had disappeared from the world. A trace of confusion flashed in Yixian's eyes. Just who was he? He had always thought that he was Yixian, that it was that simple. But now, he realized that this was just his own wishful thinking. He Yixian was not just Yixian. At this moment, Yixian's eyes became more and more confused. Lost. It was impossible for a person's life to be smooth all the time. Many times, it was possible to lose oneself and feel confused about the future. Some people could wake up and walk the road in front of them again, but there were more people who lost themselves. At this moment, he was a little confused because of this problem of karma. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded in Yixian's mind. "You are you." The voice from the 9th floor. Yixian was slightly stunned. The next moment, a smile gradually appeared on his face. He shook his head and smiled. He had actually made a stupid mistake. If he was not himself, who else could he be? Why should he care too much about the past and present lives? He just had to live according to his own ideas. No matter what the past life was, it was the past life. No matter what the next life was, it was the next life and had nothing to do with him. This life was the most important. Forget about the past life, Forget about the next life, live well in the present. At this moment, he suddenly thought of a Buddhist saying that he learned in the ancient temple, "How can there be enlightenment? Today, I know that I am who I am. Let it go." This sentence meant to let it go. There was an eminent monk in Buddhism who was too obsessed with enlightenment and lost himself. When he chose to let it go, he directly achieved enlightenment. Not being obsessed with any realm, there is no enlightenment to pursue. Forgetting everything, transcending the mortal realm, breaking through all kinds of delusions. Originally, there was nothing, how could it be stained with dust? This was a Buddhist saying in Buddhist scriptures. When he first heard it, he did not know what it meant. But now, he suddenly understood. The past life was the past life, the next life was the next life, and he, Yi Xian, was this life. It was enough to live well in this life. Why did he care about the past life? Why did he care about the next life? Because whether it was the past life or the next life, that was not him, Yi Xian. That was another Yi Xian. What he needed to do now was to live well in this life. This life was his true self. Thinking of this, Yi Xian's body suddenly surged with a dazzling Buddhist light. Not only that, but the endless power of Buddhist Dharma in his body began to overflow and then revolved around him. Looking at the Buddhist light around him, Yi Xian was a little stunned. What was this? At this moment, the power of Buddhist Dharma suddenly surged toward his brow. Soon, a golden swastika character appeared between his eyebrows. Yi Xian was a little confused. If the abbot of the ancient temple was here, he would definitely be shocked. Because this was one of the realms of Buddhism, spiritual insight. It was to clearly understand oneself and achieve enlightenment in one's heart. This realm was very, very rare in Buddhism. Usually, it only appeared on those eminent monks. Someone as young as Yi Xian was very rare, even in the realm of ultimate bliss. In fact, Yi Xian did not realize that after his spiritual insight, he lost some unknown karma. Some karmic entanglements were not innate, but caused by oneself. It could be said that the karma on his body could only be severed by himself. It was difficult for outsiders to interfere. Yi Xian realized that the power of Buddhist Dharma in his body seemed to have become stronger. As if he thought of something, he immediately activated his Vajrabuddha body. After the appearance of the Vajrabuddha body, he was stunned. This was because the Vajrabuddha body was stronger than before. At this moment, the voice from the 9th floor suddenly sounded in Yi Xian's mind. Buddhism is like this. They pay attention to enlightenment, very similar to you swordsmen. I suddenly realized that, kid, you have the potential to become a monk. Why don't you just become a monk? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. If I have Buddha in my heart, so what if I'm not a monk? If I don't have Buddha in my heart, so what if I'm a monk? As soon as his voice fell, the swastika character between his eyebrows suddenly trembled violently. The next moment, a golden light shot out from the Tendo pawnshop and into the sky. At the same time, the power of Buddhist Dharma in Yi Xian's body that was originally silent suddenly swept out like a tidal wave. Boom! The entire boundless underground city was directly enveloped by the power of Buddhist Dharma. Suddenly, the color of the swastika character between Yi Xian's eyebrows deepened. Yi Xian was a little stunned. My power of Buddhist Dharma became stronger again? At this moment, the 9th floor suddenly said, "You're really sick. You're not human at all." Yi Xian. At this moment, a monk suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. The person who came was the ancient temple's monk Shi Wu. When he saw the swastika character between Yi Xian's eyebrows, he was slightly stunned and then said with a trembling voice, "This is spiritual insight." Yi Xian blinked his eyes. "Master, what's wrong?" Ji Wu clasped his hands together. "Young Master Yi, have you achieved Dao validation?" Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "I think so." Ji Wu smiled bitterly. "Young Master Yi, you have achieved spiritual insight, but you are too calm." Yi Xian looked at Ji Wu. "Master, is spiritual insight very difficult?" Ji Wu's smile became even more bitter. "Young Master Yi, in my ancient temple, apart from an ancestor, no one has reached this realm. What do you think?" Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then said, The more you care about it, the harder it is. Ji Wu was slightly stunned, then bowed respectfully. Thank you, young Master Yi, for your advice. Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, at this moment, two old monks suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. They were the ancient temple's abbot and the governor elder. The abbot looked at Yi Xian. When he saw the swastika character between Yi Xian's eyebrows, he was stunned. After a moment, he clasped his hands together, his eyes filled with a complicated expression. Spiritual insight. Throughout the history of the ancient temple, only two people were able to achieve this realm. He had never expected that Yi Xian had actually achieved it. But how many years had it been since Yi Xian achieved it? What a monster! The governor elder felt extremely complicated in his heart as well. This slippery fellow has actually attained spiritual insight. How can I live with that? After all, once one attains spiritual insight, then cultivating the Dharma would yield twice the results with half the effort. At this moment, the Dharma energy on Yi Xian's body was still growing stronger. The abbot hesitated for a moment and then said, Young Master Yi, can you tell me how you attained spiritual insight? Yi Xian looked at the abbot. Abbot, you are an eminent monk, and your attainments in the Dharma far surpass mine. However, I feel that there is something wrong with you. The abbot said, Young Master Yi, please speak. Yi Xian smiled. You care too much. Just like now, why do you care about this so-called realm? Is the ultimate goal of cultivating the Dharma to attain enlightenment? The abbot was stunned when he heard this, and the prayer beads in his hand suddenly broke and scattered all over the ground. P.S. What is a monthly ticket? It's dust. All these years, I've been too obsessed with monthly tickets. Now I've let it go. I don't want a monthly ticket. I don't want a monthly ticket. Chapter 1261. What was the purpose of cultivating Buddhism? This question stumped the abbot. A trace of confusion appeared in the abbot's eyes. What was the purpose of cultivating Buddhism in the first place? It was to cultivate. Learning Buddhism was to become a Buddha. Learning Buddhism was to change oneself. Learning Buddhism was to cultivate one's mind. And he did it. But then it slowly changed. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly said, in the Tripitaka Sutra, there is a saying, don't create, don't create, don't create, don't create karma, don't pursue stubbornly. Master, have you done it? The abbot clasped his hands together and shook his head. Yi Xian continued, many times, stubbornness is a prison that traps oneself. Letting it go is the same as opening the prison. And now, everyone in the ancient temple is imprisoned by themselves. As he said this, he looked at the abbot and smiled. Master, forgive me for being blunt, but you are too stubborn about the study and the Tao canon. A senior once told me that the Tao canon can indeed allow one to reach above self-release or even higher, but that is a path given by others. But if others don't give us a path, do we have no path to walk? Our feet are on the body and the path is in the heart, so why do we need others to give us a path? Hearing this, the abbot looked deeply at Yi Xian and clasped his hands together. Young Master Yi, I am not as good as you. Stubbornness. At this moment, he understood why Yi Xian was so perceptive. It was not a moment of enlightenment. Yi Xian giving up the study was a kind of realm in itself. No, it should be said that Yi Xian did not care too much about the study, nor did he want to rely on the study to become stronger like everyone else. He did not care, and he was not stubborn. The abbot suddenly said, Young Master Yi, come with us to the ancient temple to cultivate. How about it? Yi Xian smiled. I will go, but not now, I still have something to deal with. The abbot clasped his hands together. Okay, we will wait for young Master Yi in the ancient temple. As he said this, he turned around and left with the governor elder. A moment later, Ji Wu also left. At this moment, the ninth floor suddenly said, will they give up on the Tao canon? Yi Xian smiled and said, I don't know. The ninth house said, the Buddhist Dharma is very profound, and you should study it. It'll be very beneficial to your cultivation. However, I don't recommend that you delve too deeply into it. It's easy to fall into a demonic trap. Yi Xian nodded. In reality, his understanding of the Buddhist Dharma was only superficial. In terms of understanding of the Buddhist Dharma, He was far inferior to the abbot and the others. However, perhaps it was because of this that he was able to achieve spiritual enlightenment more easily. This was because he had never thought much about the Buddhist sect's Tao-proving fruit. Many times, many things, and many people were like the sand in your hand. The tighter you held it, the easier it was to lose it. Yi Xian collected his thoughts and walked out of the pawnshop. Looking at the horizon, Yi Xian took in a deep breath. With a light gesture of his finger, a ray of sword light flew up and disappeared into the horizon in the blink of an eye. Unrestrained sword heart. With that epiphany just now, his sword Tao had also improved significantly. It could be said that he could now fight against a self-release realm expert like the Pope without the help of the World Prison Pagoda or the power of his bloodline. After all, he was also a fake self-release realm expert. However, there was a problem. His current enemies were not just self-release realm experts, but those above self-release realm. The godly kingdom of Shumi. He had not forgotten about this place. Mu Nianyan had suppressed the godly kingdom of Shumi and bought him half a year of time. Half a year. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian turned into a ray of sword light and disappeared. In the following period of time, the fifth dimension completely calmed down because there was no movement from the Tao world. Tao world. At this time, Jiang Yu's Tao world alliance was growing larger and larger. There were 70 self-release realm experts. It had to be said that this lineup was very terrifying. It could be said that all the self-release realm experts of the Tao world had been gathered by him. Of course, that Tao village was excluded. Although he was becoming stronger, Jiang Yu was becoming more low-key. This was because he had suffered too many losses in the past. Although he knew that the Tao scripture was in the hands of the fifth dimension's Tendo, Jiang Yu did not go find Mu Nianyan. Since the godly kingdom of Shumi knew that the Tao scripture was in Mu Nianyan's hands but did not go steal it, this was enough to prove many things. Moreover, what made him most afraid was that the fifth dimension's Tendo had taken away the bookhouse and the Pope right under their noses. How terrifying was this strength! Thus, he did not dare go find Mu Nianyan. Moreover, there was no need to find Mu Nianyan. The godly kingdom of Shumi had told him this information because they wanted to use him as a spear. He was not in a hurry right now. In any case, in his opinion, there were many people more anxious than him. In this game, whoever was anxious would suffer. On this day, a woman came to the Immortal Pavilion. This person was the Tao village's Li Qing. Inside the pavilion, Jiang Yu looked at Li Qing. "Miss, is something the matter?" Li Qing smiled. "Pavilion Master Jiang should know that the bookhouse is not in the hands of my Tao village." Jiang Yu nodded. "Yes." Li Qing looked at Jiang Yu. "Then, Pavilion Master Jiang, do you know who has the bookhouse?" Jiang Yu smiled. "In the hands of the fifth dimension's Tendo." Fifth dimension's Tendo. Li Qing frowned. Regarding the fifth dimension's Tendo, they had actually investigated this Tendo. In their investigation, this fifth dimension's Tendo was very low-key, without any sense of existence. As for his strength, they did not investigate too much. How strong could a Tendo be? But now it seemed that they had underestimated this fifth dimension's Tendo. Li Qing looked at Jiang Yu. "Since Pavilion Master Jiang already knows that the bookhouse is in the hands of the fifth dimension's Tendo, why haven't you made a move?" Jiang Yu smiled. "If the Tao village wants it, go to the fifth dimension and find her. As for me, I'm not in a hurry." Li Qing smiled. "It seems that this fifth dimension's Tendo is very strong." Jiang Yu shook his head. "If Miss has something to say, just say it." Li Qing nodded. "Pavilion Master Jiang, my Tao village wants to ally with you." Jiang Yu was silent. Li Qing continued. "The fifth dimension has already joined forces. The sixth dimension is also secretly helping Yi Xian, and the ancient temple is also protecting Yi Xian. Moreover, as far as I know, the godly kingdom of Shumi has also made a move. Pavilion Master Jiang, I think we can ally. What do you think?" Jiang Yu was silent. Li Qing continued. "Pavilion Master Jiang should understand that none of us can single-handedly swallow this Tao scripture." Jiang Yu looked at Li Qing. "We can ally, but we are only allies." The corner of Li Qing's mouth curled up, just as we thought. Pavilion Master Jiang, if my Dao village has any new news, we will send someone to inform you. If Pavilion Master Jiang has any news, please inform us as well. Jiang Yu nodded, of course. Li Qing nodded, then left. Jiang Yu looked at the departing Li Qing, deep in thought. No one knew what he was thinking. Somewhere in the starry sky, Yi Xian was flying on his sword. At this moment he was already in the Dao world. And his goal this time was the Prophet's former family. The Yi clan. He had wanted to see the Yi clan for a long time. This was the place where the Prophet had stayed. The Yi clan was located in a mountain range. Under the big sister's guidance, Yi Xian came to the depths of the mountain range. After passing through layers of dense forests, he saw an old city. The city was not big, and it was very desolate. Ruins could be seen in the surrounding mountains. It was obvious that this place had been ravaged before. Yi Xian walked into the city. There were countless weeds in the city, and it was incomparably desolate. Yi Xian said softly, "Big sister, is there no one in the Yi clan?" The big sister was silent for a moment, then said, "It should be." Back then, dozens of self-release realm powerhouses gathered at the Yi clan. Actually, Mr. always felt that there was a mastermind behind the scenes. Mastermind behind the scenes? Yi Xian frowned slightly. What do you mean? The big sister said, after Mr. obtained the Dao scripture, no one knew about it. But for some reason, there were rumors that he obtained the Dao scripture. Yi Xian asked, did he say who it was? The big sister said, no. He was just guessing. Actually, now that I think about it, it wasn't just the Dao world powerhouses who participated in the siege of the Yi clan. There should be powerhouses from other worlds too. Yi Xian asked, what do you mean? The big sister said, if it was just a self-release realm powerhouse, Mr. should be able to deal with it. Yi Xian was silent. The big sister said again, that battle was very tragic. Yi Xian looked around and said softly, I can see that. After saying that, he walked into the depths of the city. Inside the city, there were dilapidated walls and weeds everywhere. It was incomparably desolate. This was once the most prosperous place in the Dao world because the Yi clan's ancestor, Yi Lanting, was the #1 powerhouse in the Dao world. At that time, the Yi clan was incomparably glorious. Unfortunately, with Yi Lanting's disappearance, the Yi clan gradually declined. It was not easy for the Yi clan to produce Yi Qingji, but he encountered an unexpected disaster. It had to be said that the Yi clan was still quite miserable. At that moment, Yi Xian suddenly stopped in his tracks. Not far in front of him was a dilapidated hall that was covered in weeds and exuded a pungent smell of grass. The reason Yi Xian stopped was that his prison pagoda was reacting. Yi Xian took out the prison pagoda, which vibrated gently as if it was responding to something. Yi Xian said, Big sister? The big sister said softly, there might be something inside. Yi Xian nodded and pointed with his fingers. A wisp of sword light flew out and the weeds that covered the hall disappeared in an instant. Yi Xian walked toward the dilapidated hall. At that moment, a voice rang out in Yi Xian's mind. Do you really want to go in? It was the 9th floor's voice. Yi Xian frowned slightly. What's wrong? The 9th floor's voice said in a deep voice, Kid, I feel that something is wrong. Yi Xian glanced at the hall and asked, Senior, do you feel something? The 9th floor replied, I just feel that something is wrong. Yi Xian looked at the hall and scanned it with his spiritual consciousness. However, he did not feel anything. Yi Xian thought about it and turned to leave. Since the 9th floor had said that something was wrong, then there was definitely a problem. He did not want to court death. He would not do anything if he could. At that moment, a voice suddenly came from behind him. Since you're here, why don't you come in and have a seat? Chapter 1262. Someone's there. Yi Xian turned to look at the hall, but he could not sense anyone inside. Yi Xian smiled. Big sister, is it your husband? Big sister was silent. Yi Xian frowned. Is it really your husband? Big sister said softly, Let's go. Obviously, she did not want Yi Xian to enter. At this moment, another voice came from inside. Are you afraid of something? Provocation. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. I'm not afraid of anything, but I don't think there's a need to take the risk. There's no benefit, don't you think? Just because he was not afraid didn't mean he would enter. That voice smiled. Do you want benefits? Yi Xian said with a smile. That voice said, is true self-release considered a benefit? Yi Xian was silent. That voice said again, you only have one chance. At this moment, Big Sister suddenly said, let's go. Ninth floor also said, let's go. Don't hesitate. That voice smiled, let's go. Yi Xian smiled, I also want to see the former number 1 genius of the Dao world. After saying that, he walked towards the hall. Big Sister suddenly sighed, you might regret it. Yi Xian smiled, Big Sister wants me to enter, right? Big Sister was silent. Ninth floor suddenly said, kid, why are you acting on impulse? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled, I just want to see the person who schemed against me. As he spoke, he entered the hall. Inside the hall, a long-haired man sat cross-legged. The man sat on the ground, his hair draped over his shoulders, and his head was slightly lowered, so his face could not be seen. He had already guessed who the person in front of him was. Yi Qing knew. At this moment, Big Sister and the other Dao laws suddenly appeared beside Yi Xian. Looking at the long-haired man in the distance, Big Sister and the others were very excited. Obviously, Yi Xian's guess was right. At this moment, the long-haired man said softly, they're all here. Big Sister looked at the long-haired man with a complicated expression. Sir, the long-haired man smiled, I'm just an image. An image? The real prophet had disappeared. The elder sister's expression was extremely complicated. Sir, back then, the long-haired man said with a smile, this is the so-called will of the heavens. Man proposes, God disposes. As he spoke, he faced Yi Xian. Already at self-release? Yi Xian laughed and said, false escape. The long-haired man asked softly, what about her? Yi Xian looked at the long-haired man, are you talking about the plain-dressed woman? The long-haired man nodded. Yi Xian said, let's go. He went to a very, very far place. After a moment of silence, the long-haired man said, I fought her before. Yi Xian said nothing. The long-haired man chuckled. You already know the outcome. Yi Xian was silent. The long-haired man continued, when I chose you at the beginning, I only saw the great karmic luck you possessed, but I didn't see the variables of karma you possessed. That's not right, I already felt it at that time. But I feel that I can do it, feel that I can endure it. As he spoke, he shook his head and smiled. Conceit kills. Yi Xian laughed and said, Senior, as far as I know, your character in the 5th dimension is very good. The long-haired man laughed and said, does a person with good character not do bad things? Yi Xian was silent. The long-haired man smiled and said, good people can also do bad things, and bad people can also do good things. Yi Xian laughed and said, that's true. As he spoke, he looked at Big Sister and the others and said, Big Sister and the others didn't let me in just now. Let me guess, they were afraid that you would take over my body? The long-haired man laughed and said, if I wanted to take over your body, how would you resist? As he spoke, he opened his palm and the World Prison Pagoda appeared in his hand. This was created by him, so the World Prison Pagoda naturally chose him. Yi Xian laughed and said, do you know why I dared to come in? The long-haired man said, the plain-dressed woman? Yi Xian shook his head, because I feel that the prophet has disappeared. He has disappeared forever. The long-haired man was silent. Yi Xian continued, as for this Xiao Ta, if you want to take it back, you can take it back at any time. It originally didn't belong to me, Yi Xian, so I won't force it to follow me. As he spoke, he looked at Big Sister and the others and said, you guys as well. I will remember your help, but I have always been clear that you have no obligation to help me, because you don't owe me anything. For Yi Xian, he couldn't take it for granted. Simply put, he couldn't take other people's help for granted. Big Sister and the others really didn't owe Yi Xian anything. Therefore, as he said, if Big Sister and the others really wanted to leave, he definitely wouldn't force them. If others helped him, it was a favor. If they didn't help, it was their duty. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Big Sister and the others looked at him with complicated expressions. At this time, the long-haired man suddenly laughed and said, "Not bad, your attitude is very good. However, if you're really willing to come in, it should be because you have absolute confidence in yourself, right?" Yi Xian asked, "Will you take over my body?" The long-haired man laughed and said, "What do you think?" Yi Xian looked at the long-haired man and said, "When she kills, she definitely won't leave any future troubles." The place suddenly quietened down. After a while, the long-haired man laughed and said, "What a good Yi Xian. You're right, when she kills, she definitely won't leave any future troubles." Just as Yi Xian said, the prophet had really disappeared. The image in front of him wanted to take over his body? Absolutely impossible. Because he wasn't even a soul. Since he wasn't even a soul, how could he take over his body? It could be said that the prophet didn't even have the ability to take over his body. At this time, Yi Xian said again, "Senior, are you waiting for me here or?" The long-haired man shook his head and said, "I'm not waiting for you. To be more precise, I'm waiting for myself." Yi Xian looked at the long-haired man and said, "Senior, is there anything you need my help with?" The long-haired man laughed and said, "Don't you hate me? Back then I schemed against you." Yi Xian said, "Death is the most important thing." What he meant was that he was already dead. What was the use of hating him? He should think of a way to get some benefits as compensation. That would be more practical. Upon hearing Yi Xian's words, the long-haired man laughed. "Interesting. To be honest, I do have some unfulfilled wishes that I need your help with. Of course, I won't let you help me for nothing." Yi Xian said solemnly, "I won't shirk my duty." Obviously, there were benefits to be had. The long-haired man laughed and said, "When I obtained the Tao scripture back then, I already felt that something was wrong, so I hid some of my clansmen. I hope you can take care of them on my behalf. Don't let them appear in the world. Just take care of them secretly. If there are any good seedlings, you can help me nurture them." Yi Xian nodded. "No problem." The long-haired man said, "The Yi clan's hatred is not your hatred, so I won't ask you to take revenge. However, based on the current situation, you and the Tao world probably can't be reconciled." Yi Xian nodded. "Yes. As long as the Tao world did not give up on the Tao scripture, there would be no reconciliation between them." The long-haired man said with a smile, "These are actually small fries." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" The long-haired man shook his head and smiled. "You can experience it yourself in the future. One last thing. Back then, I was just a scholar who wanted to create a fair world. However, I later discovered that this was simply impossible. Although we can't achieve absolute fairness, we can make the world a better place." After saying that, he took out an ancient book and handed it to Yi Xian. "These are some ideas that I wrote back then. Take a look. It will be best if you can use it in the future. If not, you can help me leave it to a fated person. How about that?" Yi Xian glanced at the ancient book. There was no name on it. He took the ancient book and nodded. "Sure." The long-haired man looked at the big sister and the rest and said with a smile, "You can follow him in the future. He can give you a good home." The big sister said in a trembling voice, "Sir." The long-haired man shook his head. "I don't blame anyone. I don't blame him. I don't blame that plain-dressed woman. It was me who started the evil karma. I reaped the consequences of my own actions. It has nothing to do with others." The big sister fell silent. The long-haired man said again, "Also, although I created you, you have your own paths now. There is no need for you to live in the world that I once gave you. Live your own lives well." The big sister nodded slightly. "I understand." The long-haired man said with a smile, "If you follow him, it will be dangerous, but there will also be opportunities." The big sister hesitated for a moment and said, "Sir, do you know about the cause of misfortune on him?" The long-haired man glanced at Yi Xian and nodded. "I know about Daoist." The big sister hurriedly said, Do you have a way to help him get rid of that cause of misfortune? The long-haired man fell silent for a long time before shaking his head. I can't. Yi Xian asked. Could Senior do it at his peak? The long-haired man said with a smile, if it was at that time, I could buy some time for you. However, I couldn't get rid of it completely. There was no other way. Even that plain-dressed woman couldn't do it, because there was no way to force it. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? The long-haired man said with a smile, actually, it shouldn't be called the cause of misfortune. It should be called the effect of misfortune. There is a cause and effect. You have this effect of misfortune. It must be the cause of misfortune that you created. Do you understand what I mean? Yi Xian fell silent. The cause of misfortune. The prophet's meaning was very simple. Cause and effect. It was the cause that he created. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, I haven't done anything in this life. The prophet smiled. You haven't done anything, but haven't I still come to find you? Yi Xian looked at the prophet. The prophet smiled and said, this world is like this. Most of the time, the world is filled with hostility towards you. Even if you don't do anything, or even have a good heart, there might be unexpected disasters. And some evil people have done all kinds of bad things, but they are still living well. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, why is that? The prophet looked at Yi Xian, because the good and evil reincarnation path has collapsed. Yi Xian was a little puzzled. Good and evil reincarnation path? The prophet nodded. There is an ancient saying that good will be rewarded and evil will be punished. In the past, there was a very perfect good and evil reincarnation order. Good karma must have good karma, and evil karma must have evil karma. If a person wants to enter reincarnation, it is not controlled by themselves, but according to their good and evil merits when they were alive. The good will be rewarded in the next life, and the evil will be punished in the next life. However, this good and evil Tao has collapsed. The good and evil reincarnation order no longer exists. No, it should be said that it has become very chaotic. Yi Xian frowned slightly. It has become very chaotic? The prophet looked at Yi Xian, because there are evil people who are stronger than good people. The other party has reversed the good and evil karma order. Simply put, someone has broken this good and evil reincarnation path and changed this order. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he asked, is it very difficult? The prophet smiled and said, do you know how strong the plain-dressed woman is? Yi Xian shook his head, I don't know. The prophet said softly, I don't know either. Yi Xian, the prophet said again, but I know one thing about Daoist, that is, she can already break the Tao. I followed the evil Tao into reincarnation, but she easily broke the evil Tao reincarnation, forcibly erasing me from this reincarnation. This means that she can already break the Tao, but I don't know to what extent she has reached. Maybe she can only break the Tao of reincarnation, maybe she can break all the Tao in the world. P.S. I have been putting on weight recently, lack of exercise. Does anyone have any suggestions? Chapter 1263. In fact, the prophet's heart was also very complicated. When he first felt that Yi Xian had some bad karma, he still chose Yi Xian. It was not because he was arrogant, but because he was confident. He was confident that he could take on Yi Xian's karma and retribution. However, he did not expect that Yi Xian had such a terrifying Tao protector behind him. Only those who could break through the Tao could pose a threat to him. However, this kind of expert almost belonged to the legends. However, he met one. He was very unlucky. But his death was not unjust. This was the result of his own actions. At this time, Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Senior, what does breaking through the Tao mean? The prophet collected his thoughts and said with a smile, it means breaking through the Tao. Yi Xian said, can you explain in more detail? The prophet said with a smile, breaking through the Tao is very simple. Breaking through the Tao, the person is not in the Tao, and is not bound by the order set by others. Yi Xian thought for a moment and then said, it sounds very simple. The prophet laughed, it does sound simple, but to do it is as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Yi Xian looked at the prophet. Senior, can you do it? The prophet said with a smile, I originally had a lot of hope, but you also know that I was killed later. Yi Xian. The prophet looked at Yi Xian and then said, someone helped you alleviate the disaster in your body. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, it should be Nian Nian. The prophet said softly, Mu Nian Nian. Yi Xian looked at the prophet. Senior, do you know her? The prophet nodded slightly. This is a strange woman. Very strong. Yi Xian asked, how strong? The prophet said with a smile, abnormally strong. Yi Xian, the prophet said again, she is really kind. If she had the slightest evil thought, those living beings in the fifth dimension would have been long gone. Yi Xian nodded. Very kind. The prophet looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, I didn't expect her to help you. When I asked her to help me, she refused. Yi Xian was curious. What do you want her to help you with? The prophet shrugged. Let her help me protect my path, let me smoothly become you. Yi Xian was speechless. The prophet said softly, she advised me at that time that once I stepped on this path, there would be no way back. At the time, I didn't believe it. It wasn't until I was killed that I understood what she meant. She was the one who saw the farthest. Farther than I've ever seen. Unfortunately, I was a little too confident at that time. Yi Xian asked in a deep voice, Senior, have you read the scriptures before? The prophet nodded, yes. But it's just a broken page. Yi Xian frowned slightly. There is no complete Dao scripture in the study room? The prophet shook his head, no. As he said that, he looked at Yi Xian. Although it's only a broken page, it's enough for you. At least for now. Yi Xian was silent for a long time and said, Nian Nian said that it's the path given by others. After a moment of silence, the prophet said softly, I'm not as good as her. Yi Xian looked at the prophet. The prophet laughed self-deprecatingly. On this point, I'm far inferior to her. She's right. The Dao scripture is the path given to you by others. Yi Xian was silent. The prophet smiled and said, are you going to learn from her and walk your own path? Yi Xian nodded. The prophet smiled and said, stupid. Yi Xian looked at the prophet. The prophet chuckled and said, why doesn't she need the Dao scripture? Because she had already walked her own path at that time, so she didn't need the Dao scripture. And you haven't. I see that you've already reached the great realm of free heart. Why do you have an obsession in your heart? Yi Xian bowed slightly. Senior, please guide me. The prophet smiled and said, there are many paths leading to the end of the martial path. Some paths were taken by others. We can follow this path because this is someone else's experience. We can learn from it. You don't have to deliberately open up a path for yourself. Of course, if there's no path, you should have the mentality of a 5-dimensional Tendo. If there's a path, I'll walk it. If there's no path, I'll walk it myself. Do you understand what I mean? Yi Xian said softly, I understand. There's no need to be too obsessed with form. The prophet smiled slightly. The study room isn't in your hands? Yi Xian nodded. It's in Yan Yan's hands. The prophet said softly, there are some of my works in there. These works are still helpful to you. Other than that, there are 3 other things. The first is this broken page of the Dao scripture. The second is this Buddhist scripture. Yi Xian was a little curious. Buddhist scripture? The prophet nodded. It's a very interesting Buddhist scripture. As he spoke, he sized up Yi Xian and said, you've cultivated the ancient temple's Vajra Buddha body. Yi Xian nodded. The prophet said softly, it seems that you've been infected with Buddhist karma. However, it's not a bad thing. That Buddhist dharma is indeed worth studying. If you open that study room in the future, you can read that Buddhist scripture. It will be of great help to you. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. I can't open it. The prophet smiled and said, then the time is not right. Yi Xian was a little puzzled. The prophet looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, in the study room, other than the Dao scriptures and Buddhist scriptures, there is another thing. This thing is very dangerous. If you open it now, you will be in danger. Yi Xian was a little curious. What divine object? The prophet smiled and said, You'll know in the future. Yi Xian, the prophet looked at himself and said with a smile, I don't have time to chat with you. Don't you want to reach the true release one? I'll help you along the way. There are 50 great Daoists, 49 heavenly evolutions, and man escapes one. This is what a remnant page of the Tao scripture says. It means that there are 50 great Daoists in the world, but only 49 have been born. It means that Tendo is not complete, and everything has a chance of survival. And release one is this chance of survival. Do you understand what I mean? Yi Xian said in a deep voice, how do I transcend the great Daoists and reach release one? The prophet looked at Yi Xian. Ask yourself. Yi Xian was stunned. Ask me? The prophet nodded. Release one is in the word escape. We are within the great Daoists, and we are bound by the great Daoists. We cannot resist the rules of the great Daoists, at least temporarily. However, we can escape from the great Daoists, which is to escape from the great Daoists and not be bound by the great Daoists. As he said this, he paused and said, a man is like a cow. If it is led by a rope for too long, one day, even if you don't tie it up, it won't escape. Why is that? Because it is used to being bound. Even if the rope isn't fixed, it won't escape because it feels that it is still tied up. Humans are the same. The rules of the great Daoists are like this rope. If you want to understand this, you will find that reaching release one is a very, very simple matter. Yi Xian was silent. His hands slowly clenched. The prophet said, the so-called fake release one is actually deceiving oneself and others. A fake release one is like a cow that is tied up by a rope, but it tells itself that it isn't tied up. In fact, it is still tied up by that rope. And many fake release one experts always want others to untie the rope for them, but they don't know that they can actually struggle free themselves. Just like Mu Nianyan once said, if there is no path ahead, why not create one yourself? Yi Xian was silent. The prophet looked at Yi Xian. Many times, if you think about things from a different angle, everything will be easily solved. Of course, the premise is that you have enough strength. And the current you already has the strength to take that step. It will depend on whether you can understand it or not. Yi Xian suddenly said, I understand. The prophet looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled and said, it's actually not complicated. The prophet smiled and said, tell me about it. Yi Xian took a step forward. The sword domain suddenly enveloped the surroundings. The moment the sword domain appeared, his entire person became illusory. At this moment he gave off a very strange feeling. It was like he was here, but also not like he was here. It was faintly discernible, illusory. The prophet looked at Yi Xian and did not speak. Yi Xian slowly raised his right hand. The space around him surged, and the space in the sword domain began to ripple like water. And his entire person also began to ripple like water. It was very strange. The prophet was silent for a long time before saying softly, congratulations. Yi Xian smiled and said, many thanks for senior's guidance. The prophet smiled and said, there are still some flaws. Yi Xian nodded, I know. He had actually reached release one with the help of the sword domain. However, he was only release one within the sword domain. He used the sword domain to let himself transcend the great Tao, but strictly speaking, if he did not have the sword domain, he would still be within the great Tao. Simply put, this was equivalent to cheating to reach release one. This was the flaw. However, he could truly reach release one, it was just that he lacked strength right now. If he wanted to escape from the great Tao, he had to face the great Tao head-on and force himself out of the scope of the great Tao. This was very, very difficult. He had tried it just now, but his strength was not enough. However, he found that with the help of the sword domain, he could very easily reach release one. The sword domain formed its own domain, and after he comprehended it, he could use the sword domain to reach release one. However, the flaw was that he could only reach release one within the sword domain and was not bound by the great Tao. It could be said that it was only a matter of time before he reached true release one. The prophet looked at Yi Xian and chuckled, your comprehension is very good. Yi Xian said in a low voice, Senior, after I reached release one, why is my karma? The prophet said softly, because that is the cause of misfortune. Moreover, as I said before, this might be the cause of misfortune that you planted yourself. Therefore, if you want to rely on yourself to break this cause and effect, it is very, very difficult. Of course, it is not impossible. If you reach the strength of the plain-dressed woman, even the evil karma that you planted yourself can be severed. Just like the plain-dressed woman, even if she destroyed a part of the universe, this is an evil karma, but let me ask you, who can punish her? No one. Do you understand? The so-called not being affected by all karma is because my fist is hard enough. My fist is hard enough, who dares to punish me? Yi Xian was silent. Chapter 1264. Strength. The reason why the plainly dressed woman was able to avoid all karma was simply because of strength. With enough strength, all karma was just fleeting clouds. In the end, it was a matter of strength. At this moment, the prophet's body gradually turned illusory. Yi Xian looked at the prophet. The prophet smiled. At first, I was indeed a little unwilling, but after seeing you, I suddenly understood many things. No matter what, live well. With that, his body turned illusory. Big sister and the rest rushed over. The prophet smiled. Live well. Only when you are alive can you do more things. With that, he looked at Yi Xian and smiled. You and I met not because of a good cause, but because of a good effect. I schemed against you, it was my fault. The study room and shower can be considered as compensation. We are even, what do you think? Yi Xian thought about it and nodded. All right. The prophet smiled. No other thoughts, just treat them well. Goodbye. With that, he disappeared. Completely gone. Yi Xian realized that something seemed to have disappeared from his body. He looked at himself and knew that it was the prophet's karma. The prophet's karma was decreasing. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian looked at Big Sister and the rest. At this moment, Big Sister and the rest looked sluggish and at a loss. At this moment, they knew that the prophet was really gone. Yi Xian's heart was a little complicated. He did not hate the prophet. As he said, the prophet had been killed. What was there for him to hate? He was just a little emotional. Although he did not have much contact with him, he could see that the prophet was not a heinous person. Of course, he would not think that the prophet was a good person. After all, if not for the plainly dressed woman, there would not be a person named Yi Xian in this world. At this moment, Big Sister suddenly looked at Yi Xian. Let's go. Yi Xian looked at Big Sister and Big Sister said softly, actually, we are already mentally prepared. The prophet schemed against Yi Xian and was killed by the plainly dressed woman. At first, she could not accept it, but now, she was relieved. When the prophet was alive, he always talked about the word, reason. It was the prophet who was unreasonable first, so even the prophet himself was not qualified to hate Yi Xian, so what qualifications did they have to hate Yi Xian? Yi Xian said softly, let's go. Big Sister nodded. Then she brought all the Dao laws back into the prison pagoda. Yi Xian was about to leave when Big Sister suddenly said, have you ever thought about what would happen if Mr. left a strand of his soul here? Yi Xian laughed. You want to say that I was in danger just now because you guys might have helped the prophet take over my body, right? Big Sister said, yes. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he said, Big Sister, do you dare? With that he smiled and walked out. The eldest sister was silent. Did he dare? She didn't dare. Would the prophet dare? Not to mention a split soul, even a living prophet wouldn't dare. Yi Xian did not leave the Dao world right away. Instead, he found some clansmen of the prophet. Some of the prophet's clansmen lived in a small city called Gu City. It was a very small city with a population of less than 100,000. And the prophet's clansmen were hidden there. Yi Xian used the information given by the prophet to arrive in front of an old house. He knocked lightly on the door, and it suddenly opened. A hunchbacked old man glanced at Yi Xian. You are. Yi Xian opened his palm, and the prison pagoda appeared in his hand. When he saw the prison pagoda, the hunchbacked old man was stunned. A moment later, he said with a trembling voice, young patriarch. With that, he slowly knelt down. Yi Xian helped the hunchbacked old man up. Let's go in and talk. The hunchbacked old man nodded hurriedly. All right. As he spoke, he invited Yi Xian into the house. When they were walking towards the hall, Yi Xian suddenly turned his head. Not far to his right, a 10-year-old girl was sitting there. The girl was wearing a green dress. She was sitting on a stone bench and reading a book. She was very focused on her book. Yi Xian was about to retract his gaze when the girl suddenly looked at him. The girl's eyes were very calm, so calm that it was a little abnormal. Yi Xian glanced at the girl and retracted his gaze. Then he walked into the hall with the hunchbacked old man. After entering the hall, the hunchbacked old man bowed respectfully to Yi Xian and said with a trembling voice, "Young patriarch, you..." Yi Xian suddenly said, "No need to be so polite." The hunchbacked old man nodded and was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly said, "How many clansmen are there?" The hunchbacked old man said in a deep voice, "There are 360 people. 360 people. Yi Xian thought about it and said, "Are they all survivors of the Yi clan?" The hunchbacked old man shook his head. Only a few dozen people survived. Upon hearing this, Yi Xian understood. These people had developed later. The hunchbacked old man suddenly said excitedly, "Young patriarch has returned. Our Yi clan will reappear in the world." Yi Xian shook his head. The situation in the Dao world is still complicated, so you still need to continue hiding here. The hunchbacked old man hesitated and nodded. That's true. Yi Xian flicked his finger and a storage ring landed in front of the hunchbacked old man. These are some resources. Keep them. If you don't have enough, you can contact me at any time in the future. The hunchbacked old man glanced at the storage ring and hurriedly knelt down again. Thank you, young patriarch. Yi Xian asked again, "Is there anyone particularly talented in the clan?" The hunchbacked old man hesitated and said, "My granddaughter." Yi Xian looked outside the hall. That little girl? The hunchbacked old man suddenly knelt down again. Young patriarch, she is my granddaughter. However, for some unknown reason, she has been unable to cultivate. Please help her, young patriarch. In the world of warriors, not being able to cultivate was absolutely an extremely cruel thing. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "I'll go see her." As soon as he finished speaking, he walked outside and stood in front of the little girl. The hunchbacked old man hurriedly said, "Jiming, quickly kowtow to the young patriarch." The little girl looked at Yi Xian and didn't move. The hunchbacked old man was slightly anxious and wanted to say something. However, Yi Xian suddenly said, "You leave first. I'll talk to her alone." The hunchbacked old man hesitated for a moment and bowed respectfully. He didn't dare go against Yi Xian's orders. After the hunchbacked old man left, Yi Xian looked at the little girl and smiled. "You're Yi Jiming?" The little girl looked at Yi Xian and said, "The cause of misfortune." Yi Xian's expression changed drastically. What the hell? This little girl can see the cause of misfortune on me? Needless to say, Yi Xian was extremely shocked. Could I have encountered another reincarnated expert? The little girl suddenly withdrew her gaze and continued reading. Yi Xian glanced at the little girl and said, "Who are you?" The little girl replied, "Yi Jiming." Yi Xian walked over to the little girl and looked at her. "Why are you able to see the cause of misfortune on me?" Yi Jiming looked at Yi Xian. "You have a lot of questions." Yi Xian. The little girl lowered her head and continued reading. As if she'd thought of something, she looked at Yi Xian. "Someone helped you resist the cause of misfortune, but she suffered a backlash." "Munyanyan?" Yi Xian asked in a deep voice, "Is it very serious?" The little girl replied softly, "It depends." Yi Xian frowned. "Depends on the situation?" The little girl nodded. Yi Xian looked at Yi Jiming. "Are you a reincarnated person?" The little girl shook her head. "No." Yi Xian wanted to ask more, but Yi Jiming suddenly said, "Can I follow you?" Yi Xian's expression turned strange. "Follow me? What's going on?" Yi Jiming suddenly asked again, "Can I?" Yi Xian asked in a deep voice, "Why do you want to follow me?" Yi Jiming was silent. Yi Xian said, "You're very abnormal." Yi Jiming said after a long silence, "Then you can leave." Yi Xian did not hesitate and turned to leave. He was a little fearful of this mysterious little girl. Moreover, he was not a compassionate person. This little girl was clearly abnormal. Bring her along? Wouldn't that be asking for trouble? At this moment, Yi Jiming suddenly said, "The great Tao has collapsed, the order is in chaos, the Tao scripture from the heavens, the people cultivate on their own. Fortune and misfortune are interdependent, fate, everything is fate, everything is not fate." Yi Xian stopped and turned to Yi Jiming. "What do you mean?" Yi Jiming smiled. "Because the fruit is fixed, the unfinished fruit can change, its impermanence." Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "Can you say something I can understand?" Yi Jiming smiled. "This is what the second remnant page of the Tao scripture says, the karma section." Tao scripture. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. "You have the second remnant page of the Tao scripture." Yi Jiming nodded. "I've read it." Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "Who are you?" Yi Jiming stood up and walked to Yi Xian. She looked at Yi Xian. "Let me follow you, I can help you alleviate this disaster." Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "What do you see in me that makes you want to follow me?" Yi Jiming shrugged. "You're already so miserable, what's there to be afraid of?" Yi Xian fell silent. He had to admit that this woman's words made sense. He was already so miserable, what's there to be afraid of? Yi Xian looked at Yi Jiming. "Do I have any other benefits if you follow me?" Yi Jiming nodded. "Yes. I can help you reach the true self-release realm." Yi Xian was puzzled. "Then why do you want to follow me?" Yi Jiming thought for a moment. "To see the other remnant page of the Tao scripture in your study. Of course, after you take out the Tao scripture, I can also show you my remnant page and we can share it. What do you think?" Yi Xian fell silent. She wanted to see the remnant page of the Tao scripture. Yi Xian thought for a moment. "Can you really help me reach the self-release realm?" Yi Jiming nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian was about to speak. At this moment, the hunchbacked old man walked over. He glanced at Yi Xian and hesitated. "Young patriarch, can you take my granddaughter as your disciple?" Yi Xian glanced at Yi Jiming. He shook his head. "No, I'm not worthy." The hunchbacked old man. P.S. Monthly votes. This is my obsession. But I've let go of it. Chapter 1265. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the old man's expression changed, thinking that Yi Jiming had offended Yi Xian. He was about to kneel when Yi Jiming suddenly said, "Grandfather, the young clan leader has agreed to accept me as a disciple." Hearing Yi Jiming's words, the old man was stunned, then overjoyed. "Really?" Yi Jiming nodded. The hunchbacked old man hurriedly knelt before Yi Xian. However, halfway through his kneeling, Yi Xian put his fingers together and pulled the hunchbacked old man up with a force. Yi Xian smiled. "I want to take her away and let her cultivate well." The old man hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Yes. It's the lass's fortune." Saying so, he looked at Yi Jiming and said gently, "Lass, you must listen to the young clan leader. You must be good, understand?" Yi Jiming nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian left a bottle of elixirs for the old man and left with Yi Jiming. That bottle of elixirs was enough for the old man to break through again. Somewhere in the starry sky, Yi Xian was walking slowly with Yi Jiming by his side. Yi Xian said with a smile, "Miss Yi, who exactly are you?" Yi Jiming looked at Yi Xian. "I am Yi Jiming now." Yi Xian asked, "What about in the past?" Yi Jiming asked back, "What about in the past?" Yi Xian fell silent. Yi Jiming smiled. "I have no intention of harming you. At least, I don't have the ability for now." After a moment of silence, Yi Xian said, "I met you because of the misfortune seed, right?" Yi Jiming nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian's eyes narrowed. At this moment he understood. If he met Yi Jiming because of the misfortune seed, it meant that Yi Jiming could threaten him, or in other words, Yi Jiming would bring him trouble. Yi Xian sighed softly. He was a little annoyed. Who was the one who gave him this misfortune seed? Was it really his own fault? At this moment, Yi Jiming suddenly said, "But don't worry, there are two sides to every coin. Our meeting might bring you misfortune, but it could also be a blessing. Yi Xian glanced at Yi Jiming. I hope it's a good karma and not a bad one. Yi Jiming glanced at Yi Xian's abdomen. Can I enter your xiaota? Yi Xian looked at Yi Jiming. What else do you know? Yi Jiming walked up to Yi Xian and placed her finger on Yi Xian's forehead. In that instant, Yi Xian felt his entire body tremble. Then he saw countless black threads in front of him. Among these black threads, there was a blood-red thread. Apart from that, there were also some green threads among the black threads. Yi Xian looked at Yi Jiming. The latter said calmly, "These are your karmic threads of fate. The black ones are bad, the green ones are good, and the red thread is the misfortune seed." Yi Xian said softly, "You mean to say that I'm a puppet under someone else's control?" Yi Jiming shook her head. Other than a few people who can sever their own karma, everyone else is bound by the karma Dao. Because as long as you live, your actions will create karma. Just like how you helped the prophet and came to the Yi clan. That's how you met me. There are only two types of people who don't have karma. The first is those who can sever their own karma. The second is those who are dead, because after death, all karma will dissipate. Yi Xian fell silent. Yi Jiming continued, living is a kind of cultivation in itself. There are many meanings to life. It all depends on which one you choose. Yi Xian glanced at Yi Jiming. Miss Yi, you're very mysterious. Yi Jiming said softly, you're even more mysterious. Yi Xian said solemnly, aren't you afraid that I'll bring you misfortune by following me? Yi Jiming shook her head. Even if someone dies, you'll die first. Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, the space in front of Yi Xian suddenly split open and a woman walked out. It was Mu Nianyan. Seeing Mu Nianyan, Yi Xian was stunned. He hurriedly said, Sister Nianyan, why are you here? Mu Nianyan ignored Yi Xian and looked at Yi Jiming not far away. Yi Jiming also looked at Mu Nianyan. You're stronger than I thought. Mu Nianyan turned to Yi Xian. How did you meet her? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before recounting his encounter with the prophet. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian said solemnly, it can't be the prophet's scheme, right? Mu Nianyan shook her head. It's not the prophet's scheme. Saying so, she looked at Yi Jiming. It's her scheme. The prophet gave you a choice. You could choose to help his people or you could choose not to. But you chose to help. Yi Xian said solemnly, he knew that I would meet her? Mu Nianyan nodded. Yi Xian asked again, what if I don't help? Mu Nianyan smiled. If you don't help, you won't get his final gift. Yi Xian frowned. Final gift? Mu Nianyan smiled. You'll know in the future. Yi Xian was speechless. She's keeping me in suspense again. Right at this moment, Mu Nianyan suddenly made a grabbing motion with his right hand. This time, an invisible hand directly grabbed onto Yi Jiming's throat. Yi Jiming's expression was calm, but the space around him suddenly trembled as countless mysterious energies spread towards the surroundings. Mu Nianyan smirked. Dark energy. Interesting. Saying so, she waved her left hand and the surrounding dark energy was repelled. Mu Nianyan suddenly looked at Yi Xian. Should I kill her? Yi Xian looked at Yi Jiming. Why? Mu Nianyan smiled. She'll definitely bring you bad things. Yi Xian said, what will happen if I kill her now? Mu Nianyan smiled. Then the bad things will come early. Yi Xian shook his head. The result will be the same. Mu Nianyan nodded. Yes, the moment you met her, you were destined to have a bad ending. Yi Xian looked at Yi Jiming. She's plotting against me? Mu Nianyan nodded. It wasn't a coincidence that you met. Yi Jiming suddenly smiled. Miss Mu, you should have sensed me back in the Dao world. But you didn't kill me. She looked at Yi Xian. She helped you suppress the godly kingdom of Shumi, but she suffered a backlash. Because she interfered with the cause of misfortune. If you kill me now, you'll suffer another backlash. I think this backlash will be more severe than suppressing the godly kingdom of Shumi. Yi Xian looked at Mu Nianyan. Mu Nianyan smiled. It's fine. I'm invincible in the short term. Yi Xian asked, what about the long term? Mu Nianyan shrugged. The future is uncertain. Yi Xian walked to Mu Niannian, shaking his head. Don't kill her. Mu Niannian looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. You've bought me half a year, it's enough. Really? Let me face the rest by myself. Mu Niannian fell silent. Yi Xian smiled. I'm not afraid of the cause of misfortune. It doesn't matter what the consequences of my actions are, as long as I have a clear conscience. The corner of Mu Niannian's mouth curved. A clear conscience? Saying so, she let go of Yi Jiming. Yi Jiming returned to normal, and the dark energy around him disappeared. Mu Niannian looked at Yi Xian, smiling. Remember what you said today? Have a clear conscience. Saying so, she turned and left. Soon, she disappeared into the horizon. Have a clear conscience. At this time, Yi Jiming suddenly said, these words are easy to say, but it's very difficult to do. Because people are fickle. Yi Xian looked at Yi Jiming. Nian Nian is afraid of you. Yi Jiming shook his head. You're wrong. She's not afraid of me, she's afraid that I'll harm you. Yi Xian looked at Yi Jiming. Miss Yi, will you harm me? Yi Jiming smiled, not saying anything. Yi Xian suddenly smiled. Miss Yi, didn't you say you'll help me reach self-release? Yi Jiming walked to Yi Xian, her finger touching Yi Xian's forehead. In that instant, the stars in front of Yi Xian changed, and soon, countless scenes appeared in his mind. In his mind, powerful experts appeared one after another. These experts were trying to reach self-release, true self-release. And at this moment, he could actually feel the thoughts and state of all these experts. Before, when the prophet helped him, he only reminded him, but now it was different, he could clearly feel how these people reached self-release. Of course, the main reason was because he had already comprehended it. What he lacked was not comprehension, but the process. But now, he could clearly feel the process of those experts reaching self-release. Learning. Just like this, time passed bit by bit, and in the starry sky, Yi Jiming took out an ancient book and read it seriously. At the end of the starry sky, Mu Niannian walked slowly, a trace of worry in her eyes. Ling suddenly said, you should have killed her. Mu Niannian shook her head. It's already too late. If I had killed her, things would have become even more serious. Ling said solemnly, if I hadn't killed her, things would have become even more serious. Mu Niannian shook her head and sighed. This fellow is truly a devil. Her ability to cause trouble is truly unparalleled. Who can withstand this? Ling said, you shouldn't have interfered in his matters from the beginning. Mu Niannian smiled. It's already too late. Ling said solemnly, let's go. Leave this place, go far away and don't come back. With your strength, as long as you don't interfere in his matters, that calamity cause can't do anything to you. Mu Niannian smiled lightly. People must have something to pursue in life, you know what I pursue. Ling said angrily, living is the most important. Mu Niannian shook her head. Some things are more important than living. As she spoke, she had already returned to the fifth dimension. Ling said angrily, why are you so stubborn? Mu Niannian looked around and said softly, this world gave birth to me, it is my parents, and this place is also my home. If even I give up on it, who will take care of it? As she spoke, she walked into the distance. I don't have much time left. I want to choose someone who can treat this universe well. Chapter 1266. In the starry sky, Yi Xian stood quietly. Not far from him was Yi Jiming. Yi Jiming was still quietly reading her book. She was very serious. From her appearance, she looked like a very, very ordinary little girl. After an unknown period of time, Yi Xian, who was not far from Yi Jiming, suddenly opened his eyes. Yi Jiming looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian's body gradually became illusory. Yi Jiming looked at Yi Xian. Soon, Yi Xian's body became completely illusory. It was as if he didn't exist at all. Around him, the space rippled like water. This continued for about a quarter of an hour. Suddenly, Yi Xian took a deep breath and clenched his fists. Boom! In an instant, the surrounding starry sky shook violently. A powerful aura spread out like a tidal wave. The entire starry sky trembled. Solitary escape. Yi Xian's lips curled up. At this moment he had truly reached solitary escape. He didn't need the sword domain. If he used the sword domain, he found that he would become even stronger. The amplification of the sword domain was a little terrifying. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian turned to Yi Jiming. "Thank you." Yi Jiming shook his head. "It's just the beginning." Yi Xian frowned. "Just the beginning?" Yi Jiming looked at Yi Xian. "To many, you've already reached the peak. Because you've already surpassed the so-called Dao. But to some existences, you've just begun." Yi Xian said solemnly, "Those existences? For example?" Yi Jiming said, "The Dao." Yi Xian frowned. "Haven't I already escaped?" Yi Jiming chuckled. "You have escaped. But why did you use the word, escape?" To put it simply, we've escaped from the Dao. Why do we have to escape? Because we can't beat them, so we have to escape. Yi Xian was a little confused. Yi Jiming continued, "The great Dao is formless, but it exists. Escaping to the first realm is nothing more than escaping from the jurisdiction of the great Dao. To put it bluntly, escaping to the first realm is equivalent to being a fugitive. The true experts are Dao breakers." Yi Xian frowned. "Breaking through the Dao?" Yi Jiming nodded. "Your next goal is to prove your Dao. Not to escape the great Dao, but to fuse with it. After attaining the Dao, it's breaking through the Dao. Breaking through the grand Dao and standing above the Dao. One isn't bound by the laws of the heavens and earth, and one isn't tainted by karma or samsara." Yi Xian asked in a deep voice, "Is it very difficult?" Yi Jiming glanced at Yi Xian. "You asked a useless question." Yi Xian said, "Is there a big difference between self-release and Dao breaking?" Yi Jiming glanced at Yi Xian. "What do you think? One can only escape, but the other can already break through the Dao. Don't you think the difference is big?" Yi Xian asked in a deep voice, "Are there any Dao breakers now?" Yi Jiming shook his head. "Not yet." Yi Xian asked, "What about Mu Nian?" He had always wanted to know how strong Mu Nian was, but Mu Nian had always avoided this question. Yi Jiming fell silent. Yi Xian looked at Yi Jiming, waiting for an answer. A moment later, Yi Jiming said, "I can't tell you her cultivation, because I'm not sure myself. But what I can tell you is that she's different from others." She paused, then added, "My guess is that she has the ability to break through the Dao, but she didn't choose to do so." Yi Xian was puzzled. But Yi Jiming said, "Because breaking through the Dao means breaking through some existing rules and order. I think she's the protector of some existing rules and order. Do you understand what I mean?" Yi Xian said, "She's in cahoots with the great Dao." Yi Jiming nodded. "You can understand it that way." Yi Xian hurriedly said, "What do I have to do to be in cahoots with great Dao Yi?" Yi Jiming glanced at Yi Xian. "You don't have the right now." Yi Xian was speechless. Yi Jiming continued, "Not everyone wants the great Dao. You don't have the right now, but you can in the future. Of course, you might be able to break through the Dao by then." Yi Xian said, "Miss Yi, from what you're saying, if I choose to break through the Dao, I'll become an enemy of the great Dao?" Yi Jiming said softly, "From the moment you started cultivating, you were destined to fight against others, against the heavens, against fate, against the great Dao." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment. "Can't we live in peace?" Yi Jiming glanced at Yi Xian. "You're silly and naive." Yi Xian was speechless. Yi Jiming continued, "Cultivation is all about one word, fight." Yi Xian wanted to ask something else, but Yi Jiming suddenly asked, "Can I ask you a question too?" Yi Xian smiled sheepishly. "Go ahead, Miss Yi." Yi Jiming looked at Yi Xian. "You have a Dao protector, right?" Yi Xian nodded. He knew that Yi Jiming was talking about the plain-dressed woman. Yi Jiming didn't ask anything else. Yi Xian said, "What do you want to ask, Miss Yi?" Yi Jiming kept the ancient book in his hand and said softly, "No wonder. No wonder you're still alive." Yi Xian was speechless. Yi Jiming said, "Although you have the cause of misfortune, you also have great luck, and this luck was forcefully brought to you by your Dao protector. He's amazing." Yi Xian was about to speak when Yi Jiming suddenly said, "I'll take you somewhere. Do you want to go?" Yi Xian was curious. But Yi Jiming said, "Follow me." Saying that, she turned around, but quickly turned back to Yi Xian. "Either carry me on your back, or let me enter your shao." Yi Xian was puzzled. But Yi Jiming shrugged. "I don't have any power." Yi Xian said solemnly, "Miss Yi, don't joke around. When Yan Yan was about to kill you," Yi Jiming shook her head. "I can't control that power. I'm just an ordinary person now." Ordinary person? Yi Xian's expression was a little strange. What kind of person is she? Yi Xian didn't let Yi Jiming enter his shaota. He was still a little wary of this woman. Yi Xian disappeared into the starry sky with Yi Jiming. Not long after they disappeared, a dark energy suddenly gathered in the surroundings. Soon, a pitch-black shadow condensed. At the end of the starry sky, Yi Jiming turned around and slowly closed her eyes. She whispered in her heart, "Come. Let's see who's stronger, you guys or that guy." Not long later, Yi Xian arrived at a dead space under Yi Jiming's guidance. The reason why it was called dead space was because it was filled with a dark aura of death. Moreover, there was no life in the surrounding starry sky. It was dead silent. Yi Xian looked around and said softly, "Miss Yi, where are we?" Yi Jiming said, "Continue forward." Yi Xian nodded. He looked around and said, "Wait a moment." Saying that, he slowly closed his eyes. Soon, the death aura in the starry sky suddenly rushed towards him. Dead zone. His body could absorb this kind of death aura. Yi Jiming glanced at Yi Xian but didn't say anything. It didn't take long for him to absorb all the death aura in the starry sky. Yi Xian took a deep breath greedily. Actually, he had another constitution, the undying body. Of course, as he grew stronger, the undying body wasn't really enough. Undying didn't mean that he couldn't die. However, the immortal body could also be strengthened. After absorbing all the death aura, Yi Xian smiled and said, "Miss Yi, let's go." With that, he transformed into a ray of sword light and disappeared into the distance. On the way, Yi Jiming suddenly said, "You have 3 domains." Yi Xian nodded. Yi Jiming said, "Besides the sword domain, I noticed that you aren't very good at using the other 2 domains." Yi Xian was delighted. "Please guide me, Miss Yi." Yi Jiming shook her head. "I'm not good at it." Yi Xian was speechless. Yi Jiming continued, "Domain is actually an escape, because forming a domain means that you are independent of Dao." Yi Xian said solemnly, "Miss Yi, you said that you have a second Dao scripture in your hands?" Yi Jiming nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian smiled. "Aren't you afraid that I'll snatch it?" Yi Jiming asked. "Will you?" Yi Xian was silent. Yi Jiming said, "If you snatch it, you won't be you." Yi Xian shook his head with a smile. "In my opinion, Miss Yi must have something to rely on. Am I right?" Yi Jiming nodded. "You can say so." Yi Xian was about to speak when Yi Jiming suddenly pointed into the distance. "We're here." Yi Xian raised his head and saw that there was a pitch-black black hole about 10,000 feet in front of him. Yi Xian was curious. "Where is that?" Yi Jiming said, "The origin of the universe." Yi Xian frowned. "Why did you want me to come here?" Yi Jiming said, "To find the remnant pages of the Dao scripture." Yi Xian said solemnly, "There are remnant pages of the Dao scripture here?" Yi Jiming nodded. "There might be." "What you have is the complete first volume. And the second volume is in my hands. The third volume might be here." Yi Xian suddenly said, "Miss Yi, what will happen if you collect all 9 volumes of the Dao scripture?" Yi Jiming said after a moment of silence, "Basically invincible." Yi Xian shook his head with a smile. Yi Jiming said, "You don't believe me?" Yi Xian said, "Nian Nian once said that the Dao scripture is a path given by others. Even if no one gives you a path, you can still walk it yourself. Moreover, I don't think that obtaining the Dao scripture will make you invincible." Yi Jiming said, "Then give me the study room." Yi Xian was speechless. Yi Jiming said, "You reached solitary release by relying on the Dao scripture. That is the method of breakthrough mentioned in the Dao scripture. Without the Tao scripture, you probably wouldn't even know what solitary release is. Indeed, some people can walk their own path, but do you know how difficult it is? Just like you, if no one taught you, can you reach this level? Yi Xian was silent. Yi Jiming said, innovation is important, but learning is more important. And the two don't contradict each other. Yi Xian nodded. I learned. At this moment, a voice came from the black hole. You're finally here. Yi Xian's expression froze. After a moment, he looked at Yi Jiming. You're me. Yi Jiming said, you. Yi Xian was puzzled. Yi Jiming said, I've been here before, but I can't enter. Yi Xian said solemnly, you brought me here because you think I can enter? Yi Jiming nodded. Yi Xian was puzzled. Yi Jiming said after a moment of silence, maybe because you're handsome. Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 1267. Yi Xian was speechless. He didn't ask any further questions, and he just gazed at the pitch-black hole in the distance. Without any hesitation, Yi Xian transformed into a ray of light and entered the black hole. After entering, the space before Yi Xian suddenly warped, but it quickly returned to normal. At this moment, he'd appeared in a gorge. Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings. Tall mountains towered into the clouds on both sides of the gorge. Yi Xian looked ahead, and a black-clothed man was floating not too far away from him. The black-clothed man was like a shadow, and his face couldn't be seen. Yi Xian cupped his fists. Who are you? The black-clothed man spoke softly, the mad demon bloodline. Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly. He actually knows about my bloodline. Yi Jiming gazed silently at the black-clothed man. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. Senior, you are? The black-clothed man asked. Is your surname Yang? Yang? Yi Xian frowned slightly. No, my surname is Yi. The black-clothed man spoke softly. Yi Xian nodded. Yi Xian. The black-clothed man fell silent for a long time, and then he said, Do you know a man in green clothes? A man in green clothes. Yi Xian glanced at the black-clothed man and nodded. I do. As he spoke, he took out the sword spirit. The black-clothed man was slightly stunned when he saw the sword, and then he spoke softly, It's you. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Senior? The black-clothed man said, Come with me. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he followed the black-clothed man. It didn't take long for the black-clothed man to bring Yi Xian to a lake, and Yi Xian's expression instantly changed when he arrived before the lake. Because he noticed that the lake was actually emanating an extremely pure strand of spiritual energy. This spiritual energy was many times purer than the violet energy around him. Yi Jiming's eyes also flashed with a hint of surprise. What pure spiritual qi! At this moment, the man in black suddenly moved his right hand, and the surface of the lake suddenly parted. Then, a coffin slowly floated out. The man in black pointed at Yi Xian, and the coffin slowly floated in front of Yi Xian. My mission is complete. Yi Xian was a little confused. Senior, this? The man in black said softly, It's yours. Yi Xian was puzzled. Senior, aren't you going to explain? He gave me a coffin as soon as we met? Yi Xian was a little confused. The man in black said, Back then, Senior asked me to guard this coffin for 50,000 years, and today, it has been 50,000 years. Yi Xian said solemnly, Did he ask you to hand it over to me? The man in black hesitated for a moment before shaking his head. That's not true. Yi Xian was speechless. Senior, since he didn't say to give it to me, wouldn't it be too? The man in black smiled. It's fine. You're together anyway. Yi Xian was speechless. The man in black did not say anything more. He turned around and left. Yi Xian hurriedly said, Senior, Senior. The man in black looked at Yi Xian. Is there anything else? Yi Xian nodded quickly. Senior, I still feel that something is wrong. The man in black asked, What's wrong? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then said, Senior, he didn't say to hand it over to me, so I... The man in black said seriously, "You know him, right?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes," the man in black said, "I think this is heaven's will." Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. He wanted to curse. The man in black was about to leave. Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Senior, although I know him, he didn't ask me to take over this coffin." The man in black said, "You're on the same side." Yi Xian hurriedly shook his head. No, he is him. I am me. Moreover, Senior, you promised him. I think this is your responsibility." The man in black said, "My mission is completed." Yi Xian turned around and ran. The man in black was stunned. Soon, Yi Xian ran to the end of the horizon. At this moment, the man in black suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian stopped. The man in black said, "How can you run away?" Yi Xian blinked. "Senior, I'm a little flustered." The man in black said seriously, "You know the man in green." Yi Xian looked at the man in black without saying a word. The man in black said after a moment of silence, "How about this? Help me keep this item for now. When we meet the man in green in the future, help me return it to him. Is that okay?" Yi Xian still did not say a word. The man in black said, "I won't let you help for free." Yi Xian looked at the man in black, waiting for him to continue. The man in black thought for a moment, then pointed at Yi Jiming behind Yi Xian. "This person is not a good person. If she follows you, she will bring you trouble. Why don't you let me kill her? I will bear the karma for you. What do you think?" Yi Xian looked a little strange. Yi Jiming looked at the man in black without saying a word. Yi Xian said solemnly, "Senior, do you know her background?" The man in black nodded. "I know Daoist a little." Yi Xian asked hurriedly, "Where is she from?" The man in black shook his head. "I can't tell you. If you are willing to continue guarding this coffin for me, I will help you get rid of this person. Moreover, I will bear the karma for her. What do you think?" Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, "How about this? I will continue guarding this coffin for you. You don't have to kill her for me." The man in black said, "What do you mean?" Yi Xian said, "If I help you guard this coffin, you will owe me a favor. If I need your help in the future, you must help me once. What do you think?" The man in black fell silent. Yi Xian said with a smile, "Is it difficult?" After a moment of silence, the man in black said softly, "Fine, I promise you." Yi Xian nodded, "All right." At this time, the man in black took out the coffin from before and passed it to Yi Xian. "You must not open it. There is a powerful sword chi inside. If you open it by force, your soul will be destroyed." Yi Xian said solemnly, "The sword chi left by that man in green?" The man in black nodded, "Yes. Unless the person in the coffin wakes up, you must not open it. That sword chi is not a joke." The man's voice was solemn. Yi Xian nodded, "All right." The man in black was about to leave when Yi Xian suddenly said, "Senior, how can I contact you in the future?" The man in black hesitated for a moment, then he took out a black token and passed it to Yi Xian. "Crush this thing and I will be able to sense you." Saying so, he glanced at Yi Jiming behind Yi Xian. "This girl is not simple. You must be careful when you are with her." Yi Xian nodded and was about to speak when the man in black suddenly said, "Farewell." With that, the man in black suddenly said, "Farewell." Yi Xian was stunned. The man ran away too fast. At this time, Yi Jiming suddenly said, "He can sense the cause of misfortune on you. He doesn't want to have too much entanglement with you." Yi Xian said solemnly, "How strong is he?" Yi Jiming said indifferently, "Very strong." Yi Xian asked, "How strong is very strong?" Yi Jiming looked at Yi Xian. "Must you ask to the end?" Yi Xian smiled awkwardly, "I'm just curious." Yi Jiming did not say anything. Her eyes fell on the coffin. Yi Xian also looked at the coffin. "Who is inside?" Yi Xian looked at Yi Jiming. "Can you sense it?" Yi Jiming shook his head. "I can't. There is sword chi inside, and it is very strong." Yi Xian looked at the coffin, his heart filled with doubt. "Who is inside?" Suddenly Yi Jiming said, "Let's go to the bottom of the lake." Yi Xian kept the coffin and looked at the bottom of the lake. "The Tao scripture is at the bottom of the lake?" Yi Jiming shook his head. Let's go take a look. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then nodded, all right. As he spoke, he charged towards the bottom of the lake with Yi Jiming in tow. But right at this moment, a strand of sword energy suddenly shot out from the bottom of the lake, and it arrived before Yi Xian in the next moment. Yi Xian stopped. Yi Jiming squinted her eyes, a rare trace of seriousness in her eyes. Even when Moon Yanyan wanted to kill her, she did not look so serious. Yi Xian's expression was also incomparably solemn. The sword qi gave him a dangerous feeling, extremely dangerous. Although his physical body was strong, he could not block the sword qi. But what puzzled him was that the sword qi was not hostile towards him, but towards Yi Jiming behind him. At this time, a sword suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. It was the green-robed man's sword. The sword spirit trembled slightly, and the sword qi entered its body. Then, the sword spirit's aura surged. Boom! A strong sword will shot into the sky, piercing through the clouds and shaking the heavens. Yi Xian suddenly understood. This sword qi must have been left behind by the green-robed man. Yi Xian looked at the sword spirit, and the sword spirit trembled slightly before returning to the world prison pagoda. Yi Xian grinned happily. The sword spirit had just absorbed the green-robed man's sword qi, so it would definitely become stronger. Yi Jiming took a deep glance at Yi Xian. Can you tell me exactly how many Dao protectors you have? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, not many, just 5 or 6. Yi Jiming's eyelids twitched. Are you joking? Yi Xian smiled. What do you think? As he spoke, he led Yi Jiming downwards. On Yi Xian's back, Yi Jiming gazed at Yi Xian, and no one knew what she was thinking. It didn't take long for Yi Xian and Yi Jiming to arrive at the bottom of the lake. He glanced at the surroundings, but there was nothing around, not even a single fish. However, the spirit energy here was extremely abundant. Yi Jiming glanced at the surroundings, and after a moment of silence, she placed her fingers between her brows and said softly, "Open." As soon as she finished speaking, bang! The lake water in front of her and Yi Xian suddenly parted. It wasn't just the lake water, even the space in front of them was parted. Soon, an endless Shao Dao of gravel appeared before them. Yi Xian looked at Yi Jiming, who said softly, "Let's go." Yi Xian asked in a low voice, "Is it dangerous?" Yi Jiming shook her head, "I don't know." Yi Xian was speechless. Yi Jiming looked at Yi Xian, the third Dao scripture. "Aren't you tempted?" Yi Xian looked at the Shao Dao of gravel, which extended into the distance without an end. At this moment, a sword suddenly vibrated. Yi Xian was stunned. It was the sword at the top of the pagoda. It wasn't the green-robed man's sword, but the sword of the cloud-white swordsman. P.S. Congratulations to the readers of Audio for their wedding today. May you live happily ever after. Chapter 1268. Yi Xian gazed at the Shao Dao. Why is the sword reacting? Could it be that the formidable swordsman has been here? This time, Yi Xian didn't hesitate any longer, and he stepped foot onto the Shao Dao. As soon as he did, the space around him suddenly became illusory. Meanwhile, Yi Jiming suddenly said, "Watch out." Yi Xian nodded, and then he walked forward slowly. Suddenly, numerous afterimages appeared in the illusory space around him. Yi Xian frowned slightly, and he was extremely puzzled. Suddenly, the afterimages moved. The afterimages didn't attack Yi Xian, and they just moved slowly and rhythmically as if they were demonstrating something. Suddenly Yi Jiming said, "Stop." Yi Xian stopped. Yi Jiming glanced at the surroundings and said softly, "An inheritance." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "An inheritance?" Yi Jiming nodded. "Calm yourself and watch carefully." Yi Xian nodded, and then he closed his eyes slowly. It didn't take long for the afterimages to appear in his mind. In the beginning, Yi Xian was completely stunned because he didn't know what the afterimages were demonstrating. A solemn expression gradually appeared in Yi Jiming's eyes as he gazed at the afterimages. Yi Xian was about to speak when Yi Jiming said, "It's an extremely profound martial technique." A profound martial technique. Yi Xian blinked, and then he said, "Let me take another look." As soon as he finished speaking, he closed his eyes once more. At the same time, his sword domain appeared around him, and he was able to see every single move of the afterimages clearly. It didn't take long for Yi Xian's expression to become solemn as well, because he'd noticed how extraordinary these moves were. Every single one of them seemed to contain a law of the Grand Tao, and they were ever-changing and boundless. Yi Xian walked slowly into the distance. Around him, more and more afterimages appeared. The speed of these afterimages grew faster and faster. Gradually, Yi Xian became obsessed. Yi Jiming was also looking around, but her expression was calm. No one knew what she was thinking. Yi Xian's footsteps were slow at first, but soon he sped up. This was because he had already memorized the moves of the afterimages around him. However, it was very messy, and he needed to keep looking at the following demonstrations. Yi Xian was getting faster and faster, and so were the illusions around him. About 2 hours later, Yi Xian stopped because the afterimages around him had disappeared. And in front of him, there was no path. There was no way out. Yi Xian stood rooted to the ground, a little confused. Yi Jiming looked at Yi Xian silently. Yi Xian was silent. At this moment, he subconsciously recalled what Moon Yanyan had said. If there's no path, then I'll carve out a path myself. The afterimages around him had yet to finish their demonstration. In the same place, Yi Xian was silent for a moment. Then, he suddenly sat down cross-legged and began to recall the moves of the afterimages. About 2 hours later, Yi Xian stood up and began to imitate the afterimages. Beside him, Yi Jiming looked at Yi Xian silently. She did not say anything, nor did she help Yi Xian. She stood up. She had already seen through the moves of the afterimages. She was waiting for Yi Xian to look for her. There was a fundamental difference between Yi Xian looking for her and her taking the initiative to enlighten him. However, to her surprise, Yi Xian did not ask for her help. However, she was not in a hurry. Gradually, Yi Xian, who was a distance away, began to feel frustrated. Suddenly, he felt a little annoyed because when he was demonstrating those martial arts, he always did not look real. His performance was messy and there was not the slightest bit of order. When he realized that his mind was in a mess, Yi Xian immediately stopped. He sat down cross-legged and began to meditate. At that moment, he recited the Buddhist scripture taught to him by the ancient temple's abbot. Beside him, Yi Jiming had a strange expression. About an hour later, Yi Xian continued to demonstrate those martial arts. However, it was different this time, because he took out his sword. He did not know much about martial arts, and could be considered a layman. However, he knew a lot about swordsmanship. Thus, he chose what he was good at. Of course, he only wanted to give it a try. However, when he used his sword to imitate the first afterimage, he was stunned. Because he could and it was smooth. Yi Xian was overjoyed. He continued to demonstrate. Soon, on the gravel Xiao Dao, Yi Xian's every move seemed to come to life. Not far away, Yi Jiming's eyes were filled with disbelief. How is this possible? It actually changed. At that moment, what Yi Xian was demonstrating was completely different from what she had seen and understood. The martial arts that Yi Xian was demonstrating now, it was no longer a martial art, but a swordsmanship. As if thinking of something, Yi Jiming suddenly raised her head and looked into the distance. She slowly clenched her fists. This guy, not far away, Yi Xian's speed was getting faster and faster. Gradually, afterimages of swords appeared around him. At the same time, the swordwell aura around Yi Xian's body was also increasing rapidly. His swordsmanship aura had already far surpassed the unrestrained sword. Not only that, but a small gravel path suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. The path appeared again. Yi Xian walked toward the gravel path. Afterimages appeared on both sides of him, but these afterimages did not demonstrate on their own. Instead, they were imitating him. Yi Jiming slowly followed behind Yi Xian. Just like that, the two of them walked for about an hour before Yi Xian stopped once more. This time, the afterimages around him had already disappeared, but he did not stop. He was still practicing his moves. At this moment he was no longer thinking about the martial arts that those afterimages had shown him, but all the martial arts that he had learned in the past. This included the sword of life and death taught by the plain-dressed woman and the sword-drawing technique taught by the green-robed man. But when he was demonstrating the sword arts that he had learned in the past, the afterimages disappeared for some reason. Behind Yi Xian, Yi Jiming stared at him. The sword arts that Yi Xian had demonstrated, especially the sword of life and death and ultimate heaven slashing sword-drawing technique, were not purely sword arts. They were sword arts that embodied the concept of swordsmanship. In the past, Yi Xian had only learned the form, but not the essence. But now, Yi Xian was not just learning the form, but the essence. Suddenly, Yi Jiming turned around and saw a middle-aged man standing beside her. The middle-aged man wore a purple robe. His long hair draped over his shoulders and his face was covered with stubble. Yi Jiming retracted her gaze. "He's not the owner of this place." The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian from afar with a complicated look in his eyes. "I see." As he spoke, his body gradually turned illusory. He had been here before, but he had stopped here. He was unwilling to give up, so he decided to stay here. But now that he saw Yi Xian, he suddenly understood. Yi Jiming did not speak. She knew that the man beside her was no ordinary person in the past. But that was no longer important. There were some hurdles that could not be overcome, and everything else would turn into fleeting clouds. On the road to martial arts, it was unknown how many amazing super experts had died. The only difference was that some people had been remembered, but most of them did not even have a name left behind. Right at this moment, Yi Xian, who was nearby, suddenly stopped. At the instant he stopped, countless afterimages suddenly surged towards him from all directions. All of these afterimages held swords in their hands, and then they rapidly demonstrated their swordsmanship. Every afterimage demonstrated a different swordsmanship. One sword transformation. Yi Xian opened his eyes and looked at the executing heaven sword in his hand. The executing heaven sword trembled slightly and let out a sword cry. Yi Xian smiled. Sword transformation. What realm was above the unrestrained sword heart? Yi Xian did not know, because Mu Niannian had never told him. But for him, he had already found a path. To him, above the unrestrained sword heart was sword transformation. My sword can transform into tens of thousands of things. And this transformation was not just a transformation, it was a variable. At this moment, he had found his own path on the path of swordsmanship, a path that was different from others. No matter what realm was above the unrestrained sword heart, Yi Xian's realm was sword transformation. And it was also at this moment that his path of swordsmanship changed. In the past, he would only follow, always learn, always imitate, always walk the path of others. But now, he had walked a new path. Every step he took was a new innovation. Because there was no one to teach him. At this moment, Yi Jiming suddenly said, with his current realm, he is invincible within the unrestrained sword heart. Yi Xian looked at Yi Jiming, the corners of his mouth lifting. What about above unrestrained sword heart? Yi Jiming looked at Yi Xian. Above unrestrained sword heart, few can match me. In truth, Yi Jiming was feeling a little complicated. Before, Yi Xian could only be considered not bad. But now, Yi Xian was not only not bad, but terrifying. Because before Yi Xian was walking the path of others, but now, Yi Xian had walked his own path. There was a fundamental difference. How many people in this world could walk their own path? Very, very few. At present, in the entire 5th dimension and 6th dimension, as well as the Dao world, only 2 people had done it. The first was Mu Niannian, and the second was Yi Xian. How terrifying was Mu Niannian? Even Yi Jiming was afraid of that woman. If it weren't for that woman having too many restraints, she would not have dared to follow Yi Xian. That woman was so strong that even the place she lived in feared her. There was definitely a gap between Yi Xian and Mu Niannian. In the past, this gap was like a chasm, but now, this gap had shrunk. In the future, a new swordsmanship path would appear. Sword transformation. In the future, countless people would walk this path that Yi Xian had walked. However, Yi Xian was the pioneer of this path. He was unique. Just like now, those experts who studied the Tao canon were not that terrifying. But what was truly terrifying? It was the master of the Tao canon. He was the first person to open up this path. Just like the first person to break the Tao, everyone follows the great Tao, but I want to break it. Follow it, break it? These were two completely different paths. At this moment, at the end of the distant Shao Dao, a black stone door suddenly appeared. The stone door slowly opened. Inside, there was a white light and nothing could be seen. Chapter 1269. Yi Xian and Yi Jiming looked at the door. Yi Xian asked softly, "Is he asking us to enter?" Yi Jiming nodded. Yi Xian smiled, "Then let's go in." Saying so, he walked into the distance. Yi Jiming glanced at Yi Xian, then followed. Soon, Yi Xian and Yi Jiming entered the door. Behind the door, there was another world. After the two of them entered the door, they arrived at a small island. Surrounding the island was an endless sea. Not far in front of them sat a white-robed old man. In front of the white-robed old man was a chessboard. Seeing Yi Xian and Yi Jiming, the old man smiled. "Congratulations." Yi Xian bowed slightly. "What do you mean by congratulations, senior?" The old man smiled. "He has walked his own path." Yi Xian said solemnly, "That stone Shao Dao was created by senior?" The white-clothed old man nodded. "Originally, I wanted to find a successor for myself. Unfortunately, after waiting for tens of thousands of years, I still haven't found one. However, after much difficulty, a decent one has finally come, but he's walked his own path." Saying so, he shook his head and smiled. "The heavens are playing with me." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then said, "I can also be senior's successor." The old man smiled. "You can't, because he already has his own path. From a certain perspective, we are on the same path." Yi Xian fell silent. The old man suddenly looked at Yi Jiming beside Yi Xian. "This girl is not bad. Unfortunately, she is not from our world, and her background is not simple either." Yi Jiming glanced at the old man, not saying anything. Yi Xian said, "Does senior know where she is from?" The old man smiled. "You don't know?" Yi Xian shook his head. "She won't tell me." The old man smiled. "Then I won't poke my nose into other people's business." Yi Xian was speechless. The old man in white said softly, "Sit, let's have a chat." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before walking over to the white-clothed old man and sitting down. The old man in white raised his head to look at the horizon and said softly, "You're here for that scripture, right?" Yi Xian nodded. The old man in white smiled, and then he took out a black scroll and placed it on the chessboard. Yi Jiming narrowed his eyes at the sight of the black scroll. Yi Xian glanced at the black scroll. "This is the Tao scripture?" The white-robed elder nodded. The Tao scripture has a total of 9 pages. Each page is a volume. This is the 3rd volume, Variables. Yi Xian looked at the white-robed elder. "A variable?" The white-robed old man nodded. "The life and death of all things in the world are created and destroyed by variables. Therefore, not only do all things experience birth, aging, sickness, and death, the mountains and rivers of the world also experience their rise and fall, rise and fall. A person's heart experiences the changes of joy, anger, worry, longing, sorrow, fear, and shock. The natural order of time is like spring, summer, autumn, winter, or cold, warm, cold, and hot. In other words, everything in time is not eternal, it changes from time to time. The past is gone, the future is not gone, and the present is already changing. All these changes, life and death, are caused by variables." As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian and smiled. To put it simply, nothing in the universe is static. Since it is moving, it is a variable. And because of this variable, everything in the world becomes meaningful. Yi Xian was silent. Yi Jiming suddenly said, "Can the Tao of variables be controlled by humans?" The white-robed elder glanced at Yi Jiming and smiled. "Yes. As the saying goes, man can conquer the heavens. Although this saying is not absolute, it is not impossible." Yi Jiming was silent. The white-robed elder looked at Yi Xian. The Tao of the sword has changed, becoming a new Tao of the sword. However, you must understand that it is not only the Tao of the sword that can change. Life is impermanent, and everything in the world has variables. And all these years, I have comprehended one thing, and that is, life is impermanent. Although we cannot change the world, we can change ourselves, and after changing ourselves, we can change the world. If we do not change ourselves, the world will change us. And this variable, it can change life for the worse, or it can change life for the better. This does not depend on the variable, but on ourselves. Those who work hard will not have a bad life. Yi Xian said solemnly, "Senior, you should be able to see the cause of misfortune on me, right?" The white-robed elder nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian looked at the white-robed elder. The white-robed elder smiled. "Actually, you are constantly changing yourself." Hearing this, Yi Xian was slightly stunned. Soon he bowed. "I understand. The cause of misfortune." In the past, he did not know what the cause of misfortune was. He could only be controlled, manipulated. But now, he could change. Just like now, although he met Yi Jiming because of the cause of misfortune, he came to this place because of Yi Jiming, broke through his Tao of the sword, and became stronger. Just like what the Tao scripture said, there are no absolutes in the world. Many times, even a bad thing can be turned into a good thing. It all depends on how you choose. On the contrary, many times, a good thing can also be turned into a bad thing. This is the variable. The variable is not Tendo but oneself. Variable is a universal truth, but also a human truth. Moreover, it can be controlled by humans. In front of Yi Xian, the white-robed elder had a complicated look in his eyes. "Junior, you are more outstanding than I was in the past." Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Senior, you are overpraising me." The white-clothed old man said with a smile, "You are indeed more outstanding than me. Back then I was too obsessed with this Tao scripture. In fact, this Tao scripture is a path that others have walked. However, even if there is no path, we can still walk our own path. Just like that." Yi Xian solemnly said, "Senior, someone has said this to me before." The white-robed elder's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise. "Someone from the outside?" Yi Xian nodded. The white-robed elder smiled. "It seems that there are many experts in this world." Saying so, he pointed at the position in front of Yi Xian. "Once, a swordsman came here." Yi Xian solemnly said, "Was it a swordsman wearing a cloud white robe?" The white-robed elder's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise. "How do you know?" Yi Xian smiled. "I have his sword, which is why I came here." "This sword hum. I'm guessing that its previous owner came here." The white-robed elder smiled. "So that's how it is." After seeing this person, I suddenly understood a saying. When we think that this peak is the highest, little do we know that there is an even higher peak. Yi Xian solemnly said, "Senior, have you fought with him?" The white-robed elder nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian asked, "Who won and who lost?" The white-robed elder smiled. "I lost. I couldn't even take a single strike from him." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression changed. Yi Jiming also frowned. The white-robed elder's strength should have reached that level, but he couldn't even take a single strike from him. Yi Xian solemnly said, "Not even a single strike?" The white-robed elder nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian asked, "Why?" The white-robed elder smiled. "This goes back to the most basic principle, a principle that we all overlook." Yi Xian asked, "What is it?" The white-robed elder looked at Yi Xian. "The extreme." Yi Xian was a little puzzled. "The extreme?" The white-robed elder said softly, "When we do something, even if it's a very, very small thing, if we can do it to the extreme, then it's extremely terrifying. That swordsman doesn't cultivate the heart, doesn't cultivate the grand Tao, and doesn't cultivate the realm. He only cultivates the sword. He doesn't cultivate the heart, so he's neither good nor evil. He doesn't cultivate the sword because the sword is the reason and the reason is the sword. He doesn't cultivate the grand Tao because the sword is the grand Tao, and the grand Tao is his sword. He doesn't cultivate the realm, so he doesn't have a realm, so he's not bound by it." As he spoke, he picked up a chess piece from the chessboard and placed it outside the chessboard. He's not on the chessboard, so he's his own variable. Such a person is invincible to all living beings on the chessboard, because he's outside the chessboard and isn't bound by the rules of the Tao of chess. As for me, I'm still on the chessboard, so he only needs a single strike to kill me. Yi Xian said solemnly, "Am I on the chessboard as well?" Yi Jiming glanced at Yi Xian and hesitated for a moment before she said, "Don't you know what's going on?" Yi Xian, the white-robed elder, smiled. He's still on the chessboard. However, he's already familiar with the rules of the chessboard, so very few people on the chessboard are a match for him. However, he's not invincible, understand? Yi Xian nodded. I understand. The white-robed elder hesitated for a moment before he said, "There's one more thing that I have to say. It's not about the martial Tao, nor is it about the Tao scriptures. It's just some of my insights. Are you willing to listen?" Even an idiot would know how to choose. Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Please speak, senior." The white-robed elder held a chess piece in his hand and said softly, "I once gave up too much to pursue the so-called Grand Tao. Love, kinship, friendship. I once had all of these, but later on, I gave them up for the so-called Grand Tao in my heart." As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian and Yi Jiming. "Young man, mysterious girl, the pursuit of the great Tao is lonely, extremely lonely. Do not abandon those you care about and those you care about for the so-called great Tao in your heart. When one day you reach a certain peak, only to find that there's no one beside you, that feeling is truly unbearable, because there's no one to share the joy with, and no one to accompany you on the road to the future. At that time, to be invincible is a kind of irony, because it's invincible loneliness." Yi Xian fell silent. Yi Jiming fell silent. Somewhere in the distant starry sky, a woman in a plain dress suddenly stopped in her tracks. She took out a small wooden figure and looked at it in her hand. Her lips curled up slightly before she continued forward. Once, she was invincible, but she was lonely. Now, she was still invincible, but she was no longer lonely. P.S. Once, I had a lot of monthly tickets, but I was lonely. Now, I don't have any more. I'm even more lonely. Chapter 1270. Yi Xian and Yi Jiming fell silent before the chessboard. Actually, Yi Xian was deeply moved by the old man's words. He hadn't reached the peak, but he knew how it felt. Back in Azure City, he'd thought about what would happen if he didn't have a younger sister. If he didn't have a younger sister, then Yi Xian wouldn't be happy even if he became the best in Jiang. But if he had a younger sister, then Yi Xian would be happy because she would definitely be happy, and he would be able to give her a better life. He didn't learn the sword for immortality, nor did he want to be invincible. He just wanted everyone around him to be well. It was a responsibility, but it was also a form of happiness for him. Because his younger sister and the people he cared about were still around. Yi Jiming glanced at the old man and didn't speak. However, she would glance at the scripture on the chessboard from time to time. The white-robed elder looked at Yi Jiming. He pointed at the scripture and smiled. "Little girl, do you care about this scripture?" Yi Jiming nodded honestly. "Yes." The old man smiled. "I can't give it to you." Yi Jiming looked at the old man. The old man chuckled. "Because you care too much about it. Too much will cause you to be obsessed with it." With that, he looked at Yi Xian. "This little brother's mentality isn't bad. Since you met me, you've only glanced at the scripture at the beginning, but you haven't looked at it since then. That's enough to prove that you don't have any obsession with the scripture. So, I'll give it to you." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he asked, "Why?" The old man said softly, "Because you're able to treat this scripture calmly. I can rest assured that it's in your hands. In the hands of a kind-hearted person, it's a good thing. But if it falls into the hands of an evil person, then it will bring about a destructive disaster to the world. That's a variable. Whether it's good or evil depends on the person who possesses it." Yi Xian said solemnly, "Then why don't you keep it for yourself?" The old man smiled in silence. Yi Jiming suddenly said, "He's already dead." Yi Xian was stunned. He carefully sized up the white-robed old man, but in his eyes, this white-robed old man was a living person. Yi Jiming glanced at the white-robed old man and said, "He isn't a soul, nor is he a projection. He is indeed his main body, but he only has one breath left. After saying so much to us, he's about to die." The white-robed elder glanced at Yi Jiming and smiled, as expected of someone from that place. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian and said, "Little friend, has anyone ever told you that she will bring you bad things if she stays by your side?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes." The white-robed old man said softly, "Then why did you let her follow us?" Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he said, "This bad thing might become good." As he spoke, he glanced at Yi Jiming and said, "Miss Yi, who knows, we might become good friends. What do you think?" Yi Jiming said indifferently, "Mu Nian is right, the black-robed man is right, and this old man is right too." Yi Xian's face darkened. "You're saying that it's a mistake for me to let you follow us?" Yi Jiming nodded. Yi Xian was puzzled. Yi Jiming fell silent. At this moment, the white-robed elder suddenly said, "This lady is not an ordinary person." Yi Xian nodded. "I know." The old man in white said with a smile, "No matter what, since we are able to meet here, it is also a kind of fate. Little friend, I have a presumptuous request." Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Please speak, senior. I will do my best to help you." The white-robed elder smiled, and then he took out a spatial ring and passed it to Yi Xian. "This contains everything I've learned in my lifetime. I hope you can help me find a successor." Yi Xian took the spatial ring, and then he hesitated for a moment before he asked, "Can I give it to my friend?" The corners of Yi Jiming's mouth twitched, but he didn't say anything. The white-robed elder roared with laughter. "You're very frank. But do you think your friend is suitable?" Yi Xian spoke solemnly. "If she were here, Senior would definitely be overjoyed." He was naturally talking about Xianxia. He believed that the old man would definitely be overjoyed if he saw Xianxia. In terms of the martial Dao, there was no one more suitable than Xianxia. The white-robed elder roared with laughter. "All right, I believe in you." As soon as he finished speaking, his body gradually turned illusory. Meanwhile, Yi Jiming suddenly said, "Do you know where the other scriptures are?" Yi Xian was slightly displeased when he heard this because Yi Jiming's tone was slightly interrogative. As if noticing Yi Xian's displeasure, Yi Jiming glanced at him expressionlessly. "He's your senior, but not mine. Logically speaking, he should be calling me senior." The corners of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. "Miss Yi," the white-robed elder suddenly smiled. "She's actually not wrong." Yi Xian, the white-robed elder looked at Yi Jiming. "I only know of the first 4 scriptures. They're escape, karma, variables, and destiny. As for where they are, 2 of them should be in the hands of the 2 of you, right?" Yi Xian nodded. "I have one, and mine should be escape. Miss Yi also has one, and it should be karma." Yi Jiming looked at the white-robed elder. "Do you know where destiny is?" The white-robed elder shook his head. "I've looked for it before, but I couldn't find it." Yi Jiming fell silent. In truth, she knew where the scripture was, but she wanted to confirm it. The white-robed elder suddenly said, "Rumor has it that this scripture has a total of 9 scrolls. I really want to see the remaining ones. Unfortunately, I don't have the fortune to do so." As he spoke, he disappeared like a wisp of smoke. He came completely naked and left in a wisp of smoke. Yi Xian stood up and bowed respectfully to the white-robed elder. Yi Jiming's expression was calm. No one knew what he was thinking. Yi Xian looked around. There was nothing around. This senior had left nothing behind. He had left in a carefree manner without any reluctance. Perhaps he had been prepared for this. At this moment, Yi Jiming suddenly looked at Yi Xian. "Can you let me take a look at that scripture?" Yi Xian flicked his finger and the scripture landed in front of Yi Jiming. Yi Jiming looked at Yi Xian with a frown. "You're going to be so straightforward?" Yi Xian smiled. "It won't hurt if I just take a look." Yi Jiming looked at Yi Xian without saying a word. Yi Xian smiled. "Don't worry, Miss Yi. I don't have any ulterior motives. Also, forgive me for being blunt, but you don't have any ulterior motives for me right now, do you? Yi Jiming took the scripture. She did not look at it immediately. Instead, she placed her fingers on her forehead and closed her eyes. A moment later, she pointed at the scripture. Phew! Boom! In an instant, a powerful aura suddenly swept out from the scripture. Then, a white light shot up into the sky from the scripture. Seeing this, Yi Xian was stunned. What the hell is this? In the sky, an illusory figure suddenly appeared in the white light. Soon, the illusory figure began to practice. Yi Xian looked at Yi Jiming. Yi Jiming was stunned. Miss Yi Jiming was expressionless. Every scripture contains an ultimate martial art, which is the scripture martial art. This type of martial art can be said to be the highest known martial art in the entire universe. However, basically no one knows about this, not even that old man. Yi Xian subconsciously asked, "Then how do you know?" Yi Jiming glanced at Yi Xian. "That's my business." Yi Xian fell silent. This woman is so mysterious. Yi Jiming looked at the sky with a complicated look in her eyes. Rumor has it that if someone can learn all 9 scripture martial arts, Yi Xian asked, "What will happen?" Yi Jiming looked at Yi Xian. "Until now, I have never met anyone who has learned any scripture martial arts. Not even the prophet." Saying so, she looked at the sky. "This martial art is called seeking death. You can learn it." Yi Xian blinked. "Seeking death?" Yi Jiming glanced at Yi Xian. "Is there a problem?" Yi Xian said in a deep voice. "What does seeking death mean?" Yi Jiming said indifferently. "It means that once you learn this move, it will be hard for you to die even if you want to." Yi Xian looked up into the sky. He hesitated for a moment, and then he closed his eyes slowly. At this moment, that image suddenly appeared in his mind. Yi Xian's expression gradually became solemn, and it grew more and more solemn. Seeking death. A sentence suddenly appeared in Yi Xian's mind. Everyone seeks Tao, but I seek death. I beg the earth to kill me. I beg the heavens to kill me. I beg the heavens to kill me. I beg the heavenly Tao to kill me. Yi Jiming did not disturb Yi Xian. She flipped open the scripture and read it slowly. Variable. What is variable? The white-haired old man had said it before. However, the scripture had a more detailed description. Moreover, she could see more things. Yi Xian had shown her the scripture, and this martial art was her way of repaying Yi Xian. Because as of now, there were probably only 2 people in the world who knew that this scripture contained an ultimate martial art. One was the owner of the scripture, and the other was her. After reading for a long time, Yi Jiming closed the scripture. There was not much content, but to certain experts, this bit of content was enough to change their lives. Yi Jiming seemed to have thought of something. She suddenly looked at Yi Xian not far away. Looking at Yi Xian, there was a trace of doubt in her eyes. In fact, even Mu Niannian could not see as far as she could. Not only could she see the cause of misfortune on Yi Xian, but she could also see many more things. For example, Yi Xian's fate. Yi Xian's fate was the most complicated she had ever seen. In her opinion, a person like him should have died long ago. However, not only did he not die, he was still alive and well. What a freak. Yi Jiming shook her head. She did not want to get involved in Yi Xian's affairs, because even she had a bad feeling about it. It was best for her not to interfere now. If she did, it would be extremely disadvantageous to her. There was no need for her to interfere either. Right now, she and Yi Xian were just using each other. At this moment, Yi Xian, who was not far away, suddenly opened his eyes. He slowly raised his hands, and then clenched them tightly. In an instant, the entire world became illusory at this moment. Yi Jiming looked at Yi Xian with a nervous expression. You can't control that power completely right now, so don't mess around. Yi Xian said with a trembling voice, I can't help it. Yi Jiming said angrily, You fool, let me into the pagoda. Yi Xian. Chapter 1271. Yi Xian knew the severity of the situation, So he hurriedly let Yi Jiming into the prison pagoda. After Yi Jiming entered the pagoda, Yi Xian took a deep breath. There were 2 rays of golden light on his arms. That was the Buddha's aura, and under the Buddha's aura, there were also 2 blood-red rays. Seeking death. Why seeking death? It was a belief. At this moment he suddenly felt the domineering aura of the creator of this technique, or rather, helplessness. Seeking death in a fight. Yi Xian raised his head, and 2 balls of flames suddenly burned in his eyes. The Buddhist light in his arms was gradually disappearing. Not only that, but his entire body was also starting to crack. The power was too strong. And he couldn't suppress it. He hadn't expected this. He had only given it a try, but he hadn't expected it to be this strong. He had to release it. Yi Xian suddenly roared angrily. He crossed his arms and thrust them forward. Boom! In the blink of an eye, a wave of flame energy swept out from his arms, and the surroundings turned into nothingness. The entire origin ground had disappeared. No, it had been forcibly erased. He was completely erased and disappeared from this world forever. Within the pitch-black spatial hole, Yi Xian looked around in confusion. He had forcibly erased a small world. There was no surprise, only confusion. This power was a little abnormal. At this moment, Yi Jiming suddenly appeared beside him. He looked around and said, "It can be stronger." Yi Xian looked at Yi Jiming, but Yi Jiming remained expressionless. Under normal circumstances, it should be possible to directly erase the entire Dao world. Yi Xian said solemnly, "Isn't that too exaggerated?" Yi Jiming looked at Yi Xian. "Exaggerated? It's even more exaggerated than that. However, you should try not to use this martial technique." Yi Xian was puzzled. "Why?" Yi Jiming said indifferently, "Look at your body." Yi Xian hurriedly looked down at his body, and he was stunned when he saw it. His body was already in pieces. If it wasn't for the Buddhist light, his body would have been gone. Even the Vajra Buddha body could not withstand this power. Yi Jiming said softly, "For now, this Dao scripture martial art is the highest martial art in this universe." As she spoke, she paused for a moment before she continued, "Those 2 sword techniques you executed earlier were very strong as well, and their cultivation was even higher. Their might is completely dependent on your own cultivation in the sword Dao." Yi Xian knew that Yi Jiming was referring to the life and death strike and the sword drawing technique. After making a breakthrough in the sword principle realm, he did have a new understanding of these 2 sword skills. Yi Jiming continued, "This Daoist scripture martial art is extremely destructive. Every time you use it, it will result in some negative karma. For example, when you erased the source of this place, it's extremely harmful to the universe." As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. If it were used outside, this attack would be enough to destroy tens of millions of lives. Yi Xian was silent. Yi Jiming added, "No matter when, it's never wrong to treat this universe kindly." Yi Xian nodded, "I understand." Yi Jiming suddenly returned the Dao scripture to Yi Xian. "I've finished reading it." Yi Xian took the Dao scripture and asked, "Did you gain any enlightenment?" Yi Jiming said softly, "This scripture contains the Dao of the universe. As that old man said, if it falls into the hands of the wicked, it will be a disaster." Yi Xian smiled. "Did Miss Yi gain any enlightenment from it?" Yi Jiming shook her head. "Some, but it's not that helpful to me." Yi Xian was confused. Yi Jiming did not speak. But Yi Xian understood. Why was it not that helpful? Because he was strong. Just like this Dao scripture would not be of much help to Mu Niannian, because Mu Niannian was strong enough. Yi Xian blushed with shame. Why was it that every woman he met was more perverted than the next? Yi Jiming said softly, "I want to find the destiny scroll." Yi Xian said solemnly, "The 4th scroll?" Yi Jiming nodded. "That scroll should have what I want." Yi Xian asked, "Do you know where it is?" Yi Jiming hesitated, then shook his head. "I don't know. However, I know that it will definitely appear soon." Yi Xian was confused. Yi Jiming said calmly, "Why are you asking so many questions?" Yi Xian was speechless. Yi Jiming continued, "Anyway, that's what I predicted." Yi Xian was a little curious. You can tell fortunes? Yi Jiming nodded. A little. Yi Xian hurriedly pointed at himself. Tell me how my fortune is. Yi Jiming glanced at Yi Xian. I'm not qualified to read your fortune. Yi Xian was speechless. Yi Jiming glanced at the surroundings and said, there was too much commotion here just now. It might have alarmed many people. Let's go. Yi Xian nodded, and then he vanished with Yi Jiming. Not long after Yi Xian and Yi Jiming disappeared, a shadow suddenly appeared in the field. The shadow watched Yi Xian and Yi Jiming disappear into the distance. No one knew what it was thinking. At this moment, a voice came from behind the figure. Why didn't you make a move? The figure said softly, that young man isn't simple. The voice said, what's there to be afraid of? Kill him. The mysterious man suddenly turned around and clenched his right hand. Suddenly, a ferocious-looking beast appeared in his hand. The beast looked like a puppy, with 2 horns and 3 eyes. It had a ferocious face, and an extremely strong evil aura was being emitted from its body. The figure said, don't attack without my orders. Understand? The beast wasn't afraid at all. Its figure shook and struggled free of the figure. In the next moment, it was over 1 kilometer away. It gazed at the figure and laughed coldly. Bin Su, you should be aware that we don't have that much time to waste in this world. The man called Bin Su turned around and gazed at the direction Yi Xian and Yi Jiming had vanished towards. Then you go. The beast laughed coldly. Dream on. I'm not going. Bin Su spoke softly. Heaven loath, we've already broken the rules by coming to this world. Our strength has been weakened, so we have to be careful in this world. That woman was always hiding herself, but she suddenly revealed her aura and allowed us to find her. Don't you think that's very unusual? Heaven loath spoke solemnly. That young man. Bin Su nodded. That young man isn't simple at all. He possesses the cause of calamity. The cause of calamity? Heaven loath frowned slightly. The cause of calamity? Are you sure you're not joking? Bin Su replied, do I look like I'm joking? Heaven loath spoke solemnly, then why isn't he dead? Bin Su spoke softly, that's why he's not simple. Then he looked at Heaven loath, there are many experts in this world. We don't have the right to be arrogant. Heaven loath shook his head, I feel that you're too cautious. That young man isn't simple. We can just not kill him. Can't we just bring that woman along? Bin Su replied, what if she gives that thing to that young man? Heaven loath frowned. 2 balls of black light flickered in his eyes. She probably won't, right? Bin Su spoke softly, if she doesn't have the power to resist, do you think she won't? Heaven loath spoke solemnly, then are we just going to wait like this? Bin Su shook his head, we'll wait for now. In any case, we'll try not to provoke that young man if we can. Heaven loath suddenly spoke, as far as I know, there are many people in this universe who have designs on that young man. Why don't we form an alliance with them? And? Bin Su shook his head. Master said that we can't play with fools. These people are pretty stupid. Heaven loath. At the end of the distant starry sky, Yi Xian suddenly spoke. Miss Yi, can you sense that someone is following us? Yi Jiming replied calmly. Is that so? Yi Xian smiled. Miss Yi, aren't you going to tell me? Yi Jiming was silent. Yi Xian suddenly stopped and turned to look at Yi Jiming. Miss Yi, do I owe you anything? Yi Jiming looked at Yi Xian. No. Yi Xian smiled. Then do you think I should meddle in your affairs? Yi Jiming was silent. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Miss Yi, if you are my friend, then your affairs are my affairs. For my friends, I, Yi Xian, can climb a mountain of blades and dive into a sea of fire. Unfortunately, you're not my friend. So, I won't meddle in your affairs, just like you won't meddle in mine. Yi Jiming looked at Yi Xian, not saying a word. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Yi, you let me learn Dao scripture martial arts, but I also gave you Dao scripture to read. We don't owe each other anything, so I don't owe you anything. Goodbye. With that, he turned to leave. He knew that this woman was using him. He didn't say anything, but it didn't mean that he didn't know. He was just waiting for this woman to come clean with him and negotiate with him. But this woman didn't have such thoughts. Did she really think that he was a fool? Although he wasn't afraid of trouble, there was no need for him to provoke trouble. Most importantly, I'm really not that close to you. Yi Xian left decisively. At this moment, Yi Jiming suddenly said, "What do you want?" Yi Xian stopped and turned to look at Yi Jiming. "What can you give me?" Yi Jiming walked to Yi Xian. "Dao Scripture Martial Arts that can give you the second volume of Dao Scripture." Yi Xian said with a smile, "Now?" Yi Jiming shook his head. "I can't give it to you now. Half a year, I'll give it to you in half a year." Yi Xian was silent. Yi Jiming said, "Don't bite off more than you can chew. You still haven't fully comprehended the Dao Scripture Martial Arts, right?" Yi Xian still didn't say anything. Yi Jiming continued, "Moreover, I can help you find more Dao scriptures. Only I have this ability. Apart from that, I'm by your side." Yi Xian suddenly said, "Guide me and my friends." He knew that this woman in front of him was knowledgeable. If she was willing to guide him, it would be of great help to him and the people of the fifth dimension. Yi Jiming didn't hesitate. "Yes." Yi Xian nodded. "Deal." Yi Jiming looked at Yi Xian. "I will bring you trouble." Yi Xian smiled. "Miss Yi, I also have a lot of troubles, so let's trouble each other. If my troubles are big, then you'll suffer. If your troubles are big, then I'll be the one suffering." Yi Jiming calmly said, "If you know my true identity, you'll regret it." Yi Xian was curious. "What is your true identity?" Yi Jiming expressionlessly said, "Do you think I'm stupid enough to tell you?" Yi Xian said with a smile, "Do you know who I really am?" Yi Jiming looked at Yi Xian. "What is it?" Yi Xian sternly said, "Actually, I'm the son of the ninth dimension. I haven't even told my sister this secret. Miss Yi, you have to keep it a secret." Yi Jiming stared at Yi Xian. "Can I ask you for a favor?" Yi Xian was a little curious. "What is it?" Yi Jiming slowly closed her eyes, clenching her fists in anger. "I'm a scholar. Please don't insult my intelligence. Thank you." Yi Xian. P.S. Actually, I'm not an ordinary person. Chapter 1272. Just like that, Yi Xian and Yi Jiming made a deal. He had Yi Jiming follow him and Yi Jiming would help him. The two of them were helping each other. It could also be said that the two of them were using each other. The two of them did not stay in space for long. Yi Xian brought Yi Jiming back to the fifth dimension. The current fifth dimension had completely changed. From a certain perspective, the power of the fifth dimension had surpassed that of the sixth dimension. Of course, there was still a gap between them and the Dao world because the self-release realm experts of the Dao world far surpassed the fifth dimension. However, the Dao world did not dare to underestimate the fifth dimension. After Yi Xian brought Yi Jiming back to the fifth dimension, he immediately appointed Yi Jiming as an honorary elder of the Fifth Dimension Alliance. Yi Jiming was not restricted by anyone in the Fifth Dimension Alliance. Other than that, he started to develop the fifth dimension. To fight against the Dao world and the godly kingdom of Sumeru, he alone was not enough, especially with the fifth dimension calamity. That was a calamity. He needed to unite everyone in the fifth dimension and let everyone fight together. His thinking was simple. Only when everyone experienced that calamity together would they cherish the fifth dimension more. Just like many people in the secular world, if they had not experienced war, they would not know how precious peace was. On this day, Yi Xian brought Yi Jiming to Xiaoqi's courtyard. In the courtyard, Yi Jiming looked at Xiaoqi without saying a word. Xiaoqi also looked at Yi Jiming. The two of them looked at each other. Yi Xian was a little surprised. "You two know each other?" Yi Jiming shook his head and so did Xiaoqi. Yi Xian looked at Yi Jiming. Yi Jiming looked at Xiaoqi with a complicated expression. "Reincarnated person." Xiaoqi said calmly, "I am me." Yi Jiming turned to look at Yi Xian. "You can leave." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before nodding. "You two can chat slowly." With that he turned and left. In the courtyard, Yi Jiming looked at Xiaoqi. "Your relationship with him is very complicated." Seven walked in front of Yi Jiming. She wasn't big but she was slightly bigger than Yi Jiming. She looked at him and said, "I think that you are really dangerous." Yi Jiming sat on a stone stool and said, "You want to suppress the other you in your body, but you feel conflicted because you think that it is also you." Shao Qi looked at Yi Jiming silently. Yi Jiming continued, "The reason why your swordsmanship has stagnated is because you are in a dilemma, unable to let go of it." Seven was silent. Yi Jiming looked at Seven. "Why do we have to be conflicted? Who doesn't have a past and present life?" Seven shook his head. "I don't want to become someone else." Yi Jiming smiled. "How did you become someone else?" Seven looked at Yi Jiming and Yi Jiming smiled. "Actually, that is you. You are you and you won't become someone else. However, you've been avoiding it and not facing yourself. Moreover, you're afraid. It's precisely because of these reasons that you can't let go of yourself. That's why your sword Dao and your realm are so low. Otherwise, your sword Dao and realm should be higher than that fellow." Seven was silent. Yi Jiming continued, "Strictly speaking, you aren't a true reincarnated person, so you don't have to think about whether or not you will become someone else." Seven was silent. Yi Jiming continued, "If you really want to be yourself, then you have to face everything, understand yourself, and be yourself." After saying that, she turned around and left. In the courtyard, Seven was silent and didn't speak for a long time. After Yi Xian left Seven's courtyard, he found Xianxia. He passed the old man's interspatial ring to Xianxia. Xianxia looked at Yi Xian. She took the interspatial ring and turned around to walk into the house. At that moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Aren't you going to ask what it is?" Xianxia looked at Yi Xian and didn't say a word. Yi Xian smiled. "Let's walk together?" Xianxia nodded, "Okay." In the Shao Dao, Yi Xian and Xianxia walked slowly. Xianxia didn't speak much and basically didn't speak at all. Yi Xian suddenly said, "I still remember Qing City." Qing City. Xianxia glanced at Yi Xian and didn't say a word. She had met Yi Xian in Qing City, and at that time, she was still a country scholar. Yi Xian said, "Little 9, Mo Yunqi, Bai Zai, and Little and have returned to Qing City." He had actually sent people to pick up Little 9 and the others, but he found out that they had all returned to Qing City. When he found out about this news, he felt very complicated. He knew what they meant. He, Yi Xian, walked too quickly, and Little 9 and the others couldn't keep up. However, they didn't choose to forcefully follow. Among the people who came from Qing City that year, only Xianxia and Lian Wanli could keep up with his footsteps. Xianxia was silent. Indeed, on this path of martial arts, there were fewer and fewer people walking on it. Now, only she, Lian Wanli, and Yi Xian were left. Yi Xian suddenly stopped his footsteps. He turned around to look at Xianxia and said with a smile, "A senior once told me that the path of the martial way is extremely lonely. I also feel that on this path, if you walk far, it doesn't mean that your friends and family can walk far. Many times, as you walk, the people around you will become fewer and fewer. Do you know? Sometimes, I'm very afraid that one day as I walk, you, Lian Wanli, and Ling won't be around." Lonely. The martial path was lonely. In fact, it wasn't just Little 9 and Mo Yunqi, there was also Wei Yang Tian, master painter, Mo Xie. Many of the people in the past had disappeared as they walked. He was suddenly very afraid that he would become that white-clothed old man in the origin ground, and in the end, he would be the only one left. After coming out of the origin ground, the reason he returned to the fifth dimension was simply to see Xianxia, Little 7, and Lian Wanli. Xianxia suddenly grabbed Yi Xian's hand and looked at Yi Xian. "I'll go with you." Yi Xian grabbed Xianxia's hand and smiled. Thank you for always accompanying me." Xianxia shook her head. "You're still the Yi Xian I know, that's enough." She was actually afraid that Yi Xian would become another person as he walked. She liked the youth she met in Qing City. And now, the person in front of her was still that youth. Of course, this youth was much more mature than before. At this moment, a voice suddenly rang out from the side. "Oh, you're even holding hands." Lian Wanli's voice. Xianxia subconsciously wanted to retract her hand, but Yi Xian held on tightly. Yi Xian looked at Lien Wanli and smiled. Congratulations, you're half a step into the soul-escaping realm. Lien Wanli shook her head. I still can't beat you. Yi Xian blinked. Let me tell you a secret, do you want to hear it? Lien Wanli was somewhat curious. What secret? Yi Xian said seriously, my sword path has broken through again. The current me can destroy the soul-escaping realm with a single hand. I can fight at least 10 people like you. And Lanxio's lips curled up slightly, but she quickly returned to normal. Lien Wanli looked at Yi Xian, and after being stunned for a moment, she roared, You damn. Saying this, she raised her azure dragon saber and chased after Yi Xian. Yi Xian turned and ran. Seeing the two fighting in the distance, and Lanxio's smile suddenly became wider. A moment later, the three of them came to a small courtyard. Yi Xian began to cook, and the three of them sat around the table. Lien Wanli looked at Yi Xian who was cooking. Bandit Yi, why did you suddenly think of cooking for us today? Yi Xian smiled. What, do you think I'm plotting something? Lien Wanli sneered. One who is unaccountably solicitous is hiding evil intentions. Saying this, she looked at Lanxio. Be careful, my intuition tells me that he wants to sleep with you. And Lanxio was expressionless. Maybe he wants to sleep with you. Lien Wanli was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly chuckled. Why don't we sleep together? My bed is big enough. The two women suddenly looked at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian felt that something was wrong. The next moment, a large saber and a spear suddenly slashed at him. An hour later, Lanxio and Lien Wanli entered seclusion. This was because Yi Xian had given the white-clothed old man's inheritance to the two of them. In addition, he had also given the contents of the Tao scripture to the two of them. And Lanxio had already reached self-release, so this Tao scripture would be of great help to her. As for Lien Wanli, her talent was not low either. If she obtained this Tao scripture and the white-haired old man's inheritance, he believed that she would definitely have a qualitative breakthrough. Yi Xian came to Guan Yin's room. At this moment, Guan Yin had already reached half-step self-release. Her talent could be said to be no weaker than Lanxio and the others. Yi Xian took out a scroll and handed it to Guan Yin. Guan Yin was a little curious. This is? Yi Xian said, the third Tao scripture, give it to me after reading it. Guan Yin was stunned. This is a remnant page of the Tao scripture? Yi Xian nodded. Guan Yin's hand trembled. You found a remnant page of the Tao scripture. Yi Xian nodded. You can only remember this in your heart, you can't let outsiders know about it. Do you understand what I mean? Guan Yin looked at Yi Xian. You really want to show it to me? Yi Xian was a little helpless. Do I look like I'm joking? At this moment, Guan Yin's heart was incomparably complicated. This was a Tao scripture. A Tao scripture that countless people went crazy for. And this Yi Xian was actually showing it to her. Yi Xian said, I promised you that if I open the book room, I will show you the Tao scripture inside. But right now, I can't open the book room, so I will show you this scroll first. I hope it will be of help to you. Guan Yin glanced at Yi Xian. Many thanks. After saying that, she picked up the Tao scripture. Moments later, her expression became incomparably solemn. It was obvious that the contents of the Tao scripture had given her an incomparable shock. After some time, Guan Yin returned the Tao scripture to Yi Xian. I'll remember it. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Miss Guan, only you can know about this. You must not leak it, otherwise, we will all be finished. Now, he only dared to show this Tao scripture to those closest to him, because he knew that if it was leaked, and the world knew that he had two Tao scriptures, he didn't dare to think about it. Guan Yin nodded. I understand. After saying that, she looked at Yi Xian. Why did you show it to me? Yi Xian said, Didn't I promise you? Guan Yin stared at Yi Xian. I didn't expect you to be serious. Yi Xian said with a smile, Are you touched? And you want to repay me with your body? Guan Yin glanced at Yi Xian, then said, If you don't like a woman, don't flirt with her, understand? Yi Xian. FPZW, you're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.